Attend, O reader, our tale of wonder. Welcome back to Paper Cuts, everybody. Tonight we are going to be fit. Tomorrow, this chunk of time. It's tonight for me. It might be morning, it might be afternoon, it might be evening for you. Happy time zone. Uh, but we're going to be finishing the extra day. We got part of the way through the extra day. The clock no longer holds its dire grip over these children's lives, and they're enjoying every moment. And last we left off, we were going to see Comeback Stumper's sign, as we had gone through several other characters' signs beforehand. So, let's dive in to Chapter 5 of the Extra Day, because the Extra Day is like a larger block of chapters separate from the book. Part 5 of the Extra Day, within the book The Extra Day, Comeback Stumper's sign. The steep bank was easily managed. They were up it in a twinkling. They were up it in a twinkling. A line of dancing figures, all holding hands. First went the tramp, shining and glowing like a mirror in the sunshine, fire surely in him. Next Judy, almost flying with the joy and lightness in her, as of air. Tim barely able to keep tight hold of her hand, so busily did his feet love the roots and rabbit's holes of earth. And finally Uncle Felix, rolling to and fro, now sideways, now toppling headlong, roaring as he followed like a heavy wave. Fire, air, earth, and water, they summarized existence, owned and possessed the endless day, lived it, were one with it. Their leader, who apparently had swallowed the sun, fused and unified them in this amazing way with fire. And hardly had they passed the line. Oh, sorry, I paused to clean my glasses, and I have not noticed how much the sight in my left eye has changed. I thought I could continue reading. No. I can see the text where the camera is, but it's swimming just enough to be uncomfortable. There we go. Now I can see perfectly fine, as is the intended function of my eyeglasses. And hardly had they passed the line of shy forget-me-nots on top of the bank than they ran against a curious-looking object that at first appeared to be an animated bundle of some kind, but on closer inspection proved to be a human figure, stooping. It was somebody very busy about the edges of a great clump of bramble bushes. At the sound of their impetuous approach, it straightened up. It had the face of a man, yellowish, patched with red, breathless, and very hot. It was Comeback Stumper. He glared at them, furious at being disturbed, yet with an uneasy air, half comical, half ashamed, as of being caught. He took on a truculent, aggressive attitude, as though he knew he would have to explain himself and did not want to do so. He turned and faced them. Truculent. That's a good word. Truculent? Now, let's see what that means. Truculent? Truculent. Sorry, I'm reading the IPA if that sounded weird. Truculent. Eager or quick to argue or fight. Aggressively defiant. Noted. Also, I looked up a word in Dutch one time using Google on my phone for a D&D setting thing because I was like, oh, this place is gonna have Dutch vibes. And then the most Dutch vibes I gave it were some Dutch NPC names. Some vaguely Dutch NPC names. And so now every time I look up a dictionary word on Google, it's like, oh yeah, here's that word in Dutch. And I'm like, I thank you? I don't need it, but thank you anyway? Anyway, I don't remember this man's voice. Morning, he grunted fiercely. It's a lovely day. But they all agreed so promptly with him that he dropped the offensive at once. His face was very hot. It dripped. Energetic as usual, observed Uncle Felix, while Tim poked among the bushes to see what he'd been after, and Judy offered him a very dirty handkerchief to mop his forehead with. His bald head shone and glistened. Wisps of dark hair lay here and there upon it, like the feathers of a crow's torn wing. Thanks, dear, he said stiffly, using the few inches of ragged cambric and then tucking the article absent-mindedly into a pocket of his shooting coat. "I've been up very early, since dawn. Since dawn," he repeated in a much louder voice. "Got up and cracked with the sun." He meant to justify his extreme and violent activity. He glanced at the tramp with a curious air of respect. Tim thought he saluted him, but Judy declared afterwards that he was only wiping the hot stuff off the side of his dear old head. Wonderful moment. Wonderful moment, darling, ain't it, General?" said the tramp. "Best in the whole day when you come to think of it." "It is, sir," replied Stumper, as proud as though a field marshal had addressed him. "And the first." He looked more closely at the tramp, rubbing his eyes, and then produced the scrap of cambric and rubbed them again more carefully than before. Perhaps he too had been hoping for a leader. Something very proud and happy stole upon his perspiring face of ochre. He moved a step nearer. "Did you notice it this morning?" he asked in a whisper. "The dawn, I mean. Never seen anything like it in my life before. Thought I was in the Himalayas or the Caucasus again. Astonishing upon me word, the beauty of it. And the birds, do you hear 'em? Expect you usually do, though," he added, with a touch of unmistakable envy and admiration in his tone. "Uncommon," agreed the tramp, "and no mistake about it. They knew, you see." They no longer called each other sir and general. They'd come to an understanding, apparently. "Humph," said Stumper, and looked around shyly at the others. Stumper was evidently under the stress of some divine emotion he was half ashamed of. An unwonted passion stirred him. He seemed a prey to an unusual and irrepressible curiosity. Only the obvious fact that his listeners shared the same feelings with him loosened his sticky tongue and stole self-consciousness away. He had expected to be laughed at. Instead, the group admired him. The tramp, his manner proved it, thought of him very highly indeed. "Never knew such a day in all my life before," Stumper admitted frankly. Simply couldn't stay indoors." He still retained a trace of challenge in his tone, but no one challenged him. Judy took his arm. "So you came out? Like us." Like us," said Uncle Felix. "Of course," Tim added. But it was the tramp who supplied the significant words they'd all been waiting for. Stumper himself more eagerly than anyone else. "To look," he remarked quite naturally. Stumper might have just won a great world victory, judging by the expression that danced upon his face. He dropped all pretense at further concealment. He put his other arm round Tim's shoulder, partly to balance himself better against Judy's pushing, and partly because he realized the companionship of both children as very dear just then. He had a great deal to say, and he wanted to say it all at once, but words never came to him too easily. He had missed many an opportunity in his life for the want of fluid and spontaneous address. He stammered and halted somewhat at his delivery. A new language with but a single word in it would have suited him admirably. "Yes, I came out to look, but when I got out, I clean forgot what it was. No, what?" he corrected himself again. "I'd come out to look for. Can't make it out at all." He broke off his sentence in a troubled way. "No?" agreed Judy sympathetically, as though she knew. "But you want to find it, awfully," Tim stated as a fact. "Awfully," admitted Stumper with some kind of fierceness. "Only you can't remember what it looks like, quite?" Stumper hesitated a moment. "Too wonderful to remember properly," he said more quietly, something like that. "But the odd thing is, I've seen it. I know I've seen it. Saw it this morning very early when the pigeon woke me up at dawn." "Pigeon!" exclaimed Tim and Judy simultaneously. "Dawn!" "A carrier pigeon flew in at my open window and woke me," continued the soldier in his gruff old voice. "I've used 'em, carrier pigeons, you know. Sent messages years ago. Understand the birds a bit. Extraordinary thing, I thought. Got up and looked at it." Said someone by way of encouragement. And it looked back at me. By the way he said it, it was clear he hardly expected to be believed. Oh, library was just getting a little bit of a goof face on, and then the neighbors made a noise. Uh, of course. Naturally, added Tim. What do you think? Stumper went on a note of yearning and even passion in his voice. What do you think? I felt it had a message for me, brought me a message, something to tell me. Around its neck or foot? Stumper drew the boy closer and looked down into his face. Eyes. In its small, bright eyes, there was a flash. I saw it plainly. Something strange and marvelous, something I've been looking for all my life. No one said a single word, but the old soldier felt the understanding sympathy rising like steam from all of them. And suddenly it was gone, out into the open sky, bang into the sunrise. Saw the dawn all over everything, dressed, rushed out, and Had it laid an egg? Tim asked, remembering another kind of hunting somewhere, long ago. How could it? Judy corrected him quickly. There was no time. Then stopped abruptly. She turned toward Comeback Stumper, gave him a hurried and affectionate hug. And then, what happened next? Stumper returned the hug, including Tim in it too. I found this, fluttering in my hand. He held up a small gray feather for them to admire. Only clue I've got. The pigeon left it, you know. While they admired the feather and exhibited their own, Tim cried, We've got 5 now, nearly a whole wing. Stumper was heard to murmur above their heads. Since I came out to look, I've felt quite different. You see what's in the wind and open sky, cried Judy, dancing round him with excitement. Her voice came flying from the air. You're awfully warm, you're hot, you're burning, shouted Tim, clapping his hands. His voice seemed to rise out of the earth. We've all seen it, all had a glimpse, roared Uncle Felix, with a sound of falling water, rolling up nearer as he spoke. It's too wonderful to see for too long, too wonderful to remember quite. But we all shall find it in the end. We're all looking. He began a sort of dancing step. And when we find it, we'll change the world. We'll change the world, shouted Stumper, as though he uttered a final word of command. It's a he, remember? Come along, interrupted Tim. Then the tramp, who had been standing quietly by, smiling to himself, but saying nothing, came nearer, opened his great arms, and drew the 4 of them together. His voice, his shining presence, the warm brilliance that glowed about him, seemed to envelop them like a flame of fire and a fire of love. We're thinking and arguing too much, he drawled in his big leisurely voice. We'll lose the trail that way, lose the rhythm. Just love and look and wonder. Then we'll find it. There's no hurry. Life's just begun. Keep on looking all the time. He turned to Stumper with a chuckle. You said you had a flash. What's become of it? You can't have lost it with the pigeon's feather in your hand. It's waggling, announced Tim, holding up his own, while the others followed suit. The little feathers all bent one way, toward the bramble clump, and their tiny singing music was just audible in the pause. Yeah, replied Stumper at length, but flashes, in fact. What's more, he added proudly, I was after a couple of them just when you arrived. Everybody talked at once then. Uncle Felix and the children fell to explaining the signs and traces that they had already discovered, each affirming vehemently that their own particular sign was the loveliest. The dragonfly, the flowers, the wind, the bending reeds, even the lizard and the bumblebee. The chorus of sound was like the chattering of rooks among the tree-tops. In fact, though the quality of tone was different, the resemblance to a concert of birds all singing together in a summer garden was quite striking. Out of the hubbub single words emerged occasionally. Robin, swallows, up and under bird. Yet, strange to say, so far as Stumper was concerned, only one thing was said. All said the same one thing. And he heard this one thing only, as though the words and sentences they used were but different ways of pronouncing it, of spelling it, of uttering it. Moreover, the wind and the feather said it too, for the sound and intonation were similar. It was the thing the wind and running water said, that the flame roared in the fireplace, that raindrops pattered on the leaves, even house flies buzzing across the window panes, everything, everywhere. The whole earth said it. He stood still, listening in amazement. His face had dried by now. He passed his hand across it and tugged at his fierce military mustache. "Hiding near us, in the open, everywhere," he muttered, though no one heard it. "Had my flashes, too." "Well, different people got different signs, of course." The tramp made himself heard at length. "They're all the same. All them lie along the trail. Earth's a globe and a circle. Everything leads to the same place, in the end." "Yeah, thank you," Stumper said, as though he knew this already, but felt it was neatly put. "Follow up your flash. Smell and then follow. That is, keep on looking." Stumper turned, pirouetting on what the children called his living leg. "I will," he cried with an air of self-abandonment, and promptly diving by a clever maneuver out of their hands, he fell heavily upon all fours and disappeared beneath the dense bramble just behind them. Panting and certainly perspiring afresh, he forced his way in among the network of thick leaves and prickly branches. They heard him puffing. It seemed they heard him singing, too, as he reached forward with both arms into the dark interior. Caught by his wholehearted energy, they tried to help. They pushed behind. They did their best to open a way for his head between the entwining brambles. "Don't! Don't scratch my eyes out. I shan't see anything," he roared inside. His mouth was apparently full of earth. They watched the retreating soles of his heavy shooting boots. Slowly the feet were dragged in after him. They disappeared from sight, and Stumper was gone. "You'll come back, though," mentioned Judy. The performance had been so interesting that she almost forgot its object, however. Tim reminded her. "We won't find anything in a smelly place like that. I mean, it can't be a beetle or a grub that we're looking for." Yet there was doubt and wonder in his voice. Stumper, a man like that, and a soldier, a hunter too, had done scouting in an Indian jungle, and met tigers face to face. A chap like that could hardly disappear on all fours into a clump of bramble bushes without excellent reason. As interval of comparative silence followed, it was broken only by the faint murmur of the wind that stirred their humming feathers. They stood in a row and listened intently. Hardly a sound came from the interior of the bramble bushes. The soldier had justified his title. He had retired plately. To Judy it occurred that he might have suffocated, to Tim that he might have been eaten by some animal, to Uncle Felix that he might have slipped out on the other side and made his escape, but no one expressed these idle thoughts in words. They believed in Stumper, really. He invariably came back. This time would be no exception to the rule. And presently, as usual, Stumper did come back. They heard him grunting and panting long before a sign of him was visible. They heard his voice. "Got him. Knew I was right. As he spluttered earth and leaves from his mouth, apparently. He emerged by degrees and backwards, backed out indeed like an enormous rabbit. His boots, his legs, his hands planted on the ground, his neck, and then his face, looking out over his shoulder, appeared successively. "Just the kind of place he would choose," he exclaimed triumphantly, collapsing back onto his haunches and taking a long, deep breath. Beside the triumph in his voice there was a touch of indescribable gruff sweetness the children knew was always in his heart. No amount of curried liver trouble would smother that. Just now it was more marked than usual. "Show us," they cried, gathering around him. Judy helped him to his feet. He seemed a little unsteady. Purple with the exertion of the search, both cheeks smeared with earth, necktie crooked, and an old gray shooting coat halfway up his back, come-back Stumper stood upright and looked at them with shining eyes. He was the picture of a happy and successful man. "There," he growled and held out a hand, palm upward, still trembling with his recent exertions. "Didn't I tell you?" They crowded round to examine a small object that lay between two smears of earth in the center of his upturned palm. It was round and had a neat little opening in its underside. It was pretty, certainly. Their heads pressed forward in a bunch, like cabbages heaped for market, but no one spoke. Sit, so it is. He bent forward till his head meted with theirs, his big aquiline nose in everybody's way. We see it. Yes. It's a snail shell, I think. The shade of disappointment in his voice was reflected in the children's faces, too, as they all straightened up and gazed expectantly at the panting soldier. That all? Was the sentence no one liked to utter. Stumper roared at them. Snail shell? Of course it's a snail shell. Did you ever see such a snail shell in your lives before? Look at the color. Look at the shape. Put it against your ears. Hear it singing. He was furious with their lack of appreciation. It's a common sort. Something rather vulgaris. And we tell them everywhere, mentioned Tim beneath his breath to Judy, but Stumper overheard them. Common sort, hundreds everywhere, he shouted, his voice almost choking in his throat. Look at the color, look at the shape, I tell you, listen to it. He said the last words with a sudden softness. They lowered their heads again for a new examination. What more do you want, I'd like to know? There's color for you, there's wonder, sheer bit of living beauty. He lowered his head again, so eagerly that it knocked audibly against Tim's skull. Please move your nose away, I can't see. Common indeed, growled the soldier, making room willingly enough, while they obeyed his booming orders. They felt a little ashamed of themselves for being so obtuse, for now that they looked closer, they saw that the shell certainly was very beautiful. Common indeed, why, you know, Simon, right before your noses. Judy pulled the fingers apart to make it roll towards her. She felt it all over, stroking the smooth beauty of its delicate curves. It was exquisitely tinted. It shone and glinted in the morning sunlight. She put it against her ear and listened. Oh, she exclaimed, it is singing, as the murmur of the wind explored its hollow windings. That's the Ganges, explained Stumper in a softer voice. Waves of the Ganges breaking on the yellow sands of India. Wind in the jungle, too. His face looked happy as he watched her. His explosions never lasted long. She passed it over to her brother, who crammed it against his ear and listened with incredible grimaces as though it hurt him. I can hear the tiger's footsteps, he declared, screwing up his eyes. Birds of paradise, all sorts of things. He handed it on reluctantly to his uncle, who listened so deeply in his turn that he had to shut both eyes. I hear calling voices. Voices calling everywhere. It's wonderful, like a sea of voices from the other side of the world. The whole world singing. Oh, bud, you have gunk on your face. Sorry, one moment. I am distracted by poor Magnus having a little bit of gunk on his face. There. Isn't that better? We can't let you wander around with gunk on your face, young man. It will dry on your face, and then I will have to get out the little wipey cloth. And I know you hate that one, so... Almost got it. There we are. How's that? A little better? Yeah, there we go. Whole world singing. Look at the color, will you? Urged Stumper, snatching it away from the listener, who seemed in danger of becoming entranced. He's not only passed this way, he actually touched it. That's his touch, I tell you. That's right, mumbled the tramp, watching the whole performance with approval. Folks without something are always sharper than the others. But this reference to a wooden leg was also too low for anyone to hear it. Besides, Stumper was saying something wonderful just then. He lowered his voice to say it. There was suppressed excitement in him. He frowned and looked half savagely at them all. I found 2 other signs as well. 2 other signs. In the darkness of those bushes I saw, and... flash. 2 of them. He slowly extended his other hand, which till now he had kept behind his back. It was tightly clenched. He unloosed the fingers gradually. Look, he whispered mysteriously, and the hand lay open before their eyes. He's been hiding in those very bushes, I tell you. A moment sooner, and we might have caught him. His enthusiasm ran all over them as they pressed forward to examine the second grimy hand. There were two things visible in it, and both were moving. One indeed moved so fast they hardly saw it. It was a shining glimpse, a flash of a lovely golden bronze shot through with blue, and it was gone. Like a wee veiled torch, it scuttled across the palm, circled the thumb, popped down the other side, and dropped upon the ground, vanished as soon as it was seen. A beetle! A tiny beetle! But dipped in color the color of dawn. Well, another sign I never. Or wait, that was the uncle. Another sign I never. He was envious of the soldier's triumph. Well, he looks in the unlikely places, muttered the tramp again, approvingly. You've been pretty warm this time. But again, he said it too low to be audible. Besides, Stumper's other find engrossed everyone's attention. All were absorbed in the long, dainty object that clung cautiously to his hand, and showed no desire to hurry out of sight after the brilliant beetle. It was familiar enough to all of them, yet marvelous. It presented itself in a new, original light. They watched it, spellbound, its tiny legs moving carefully over the wrinkles of the soldier's skin, feeling its way most delicately, and turning its head this way and that to sniff the unaccustomed odor. Sometimes it looked back to admire its own painted back, and to let its distant tail know that all was going well. The colored hairs upon the graceful body were all a-quiver. It fairly shone. There was obviously no fear in it. It had perfect control of all its length and legs, and yet, fully aware that it was exploring a new country, sometimes raised its head in a hesitating way, and looked questioningly about it, and even into the great faces so close against its eyes. A caterpillar, a common woolly bear. Tickles. I'll get a leaf. Doesn't understand your smell, probably. She turned and picked the biggest she could find, and the caterpillar, after careful observation, moved forward onto it, turning to inform its following tail that all was safe. Gently and cleverly they restored it to the bush whence Stumper had removed it. It went to join the snail shell and the beetle. They stood a moment in silence, and watched the quiet way it hid itself among the waves of green the wind stirred to and fro. It seemed to melt away. It hid itself. It left them. It was gone. And Stumper turned and looked at them with the air of a man who has justified himself. He had certainly discovered definite signs. But there was bewilderment among the group as well as their pleasure. For signs, they began to realize now, were everywhere indeed. The world was smothered with them. There was no one clear track that they could follow. All nature seemed organized to hide the very thing they looked for. It was a conspiracy. It was indeed an enormous hide, an endless game of hide and seek. The interest and the wonder increased sensibly in their hearts. The thing they sought to find, the stranger, it, by whatever name each chose to call the mysterious and evasive hider, was so marvelously hidden. The glimpse they once had known seemed very long, long ago, and very far away. It lay like a sweet memory in each heart, half forgotten, half remembered, but always entirely believed in, very dear and very exquisite. The precious memory urged them forward. They would search and search until they rediscovered it, even though their whole lives were spent in looking. They were quite positive they would find him in the end. Now, Library, I need you to drink the water carefully. I don't want to clean up puke during stream again. You made people very nervous last time. I'm people. I'm who he made nervous. The thing is, he eats a whole bunch, and then he drinks a whole bunch of water, then his cat food swells, and it doesn't end well. From the water. Careful, kitty. Don't drink too much. Oh, he's got a point, though. I should also load up on water a little bit. All this lay somehow in the expression on Stamper's face as he glared at them and ejaculated a triumphant, "There! I told you so!" And at that moment, as though to emphasize the thrill of excited bewilderment they felt, a gorgeous brimstone butterfly sailed carelessly past before their eyes and vanished among the pools of sunlight by the forest edge. Its presence added somehow to the elusive and difficult nature of their search. Its flamboyant beauty was a kind of challenge. "That's what the caterpillar gets into," observed Trim dreamily. "Let's follow it," said Judy. "I believe the flying signs are best." "Well, it's puzzling, though," put in the tramp behind them. They'd quite forgotten his existence. "Let's ask the gardener what he thinks." He pointed to a spot a little further along the edge of the road, where the figure of a man was visible. It seemed a good idea. Led by the tramp, Uncle Felix and Stumper following slowly in the rear, they moved forward in a group. Whedon might have seen something. They would ask him. Ugh. Okay, before we dive into Whedon's sign, I'm gonna grab a bit more water. I'm also gonna make sure nothing is on fire. Sorry, I have a Discord that I moderate, and the people in it love to break the one rule that's an actual rule, which is don't post anything exhausting outside the exhausting things channel. So every time someone sends a message, I'm like, my immediate response is, "Oh, did they forget to do the thing again?" Really, what I should do is deputize a moderator so I don't have to pay attention to it. But that's effort. It's one of those things where, it would overall be less effort for me to get a moderator for that Discord. But also, the process of finding a moderator seems like such a gargantuan task that I'm just gonna not do it and make myself more work. You know how it is. It's like, oh man, I don't want to get out the whole mixer for this one small thing, and then the one small thing turns into three larger things, and you're still not using the mixer, even though you're trying to hand whip whipped cream with a whisk, like some kind of, Popeye, and it just doesn't end well. It's exactly like that kind of situation. Speaking of, I should buy whipping cream when I'm getting groceries this week, because I need to try a specific thing so that I know if I can, so that I can know if my clever coffee ice cream plan will work. Because that's something I want to surprise Raz with, is coffee ice cream. But the way I would go about it, I need to test with some other stuff. So we shall see. But I'll blither blather about recipes another time. Let's get into Whedon's sign. It's part 7 of the extra day. John Whedon. The children always saw his surname in capitals, so you would say it, Whedon! Was probably the most competent head gardener of his age, or of any other age. He supplied the household with fruit and vegetables without grumbling or making excuses. When asked to furnish flowers at a short notice for a dinner party, he made no difficulty, but just produced them. Neither did he complain about the weather. Wet or dry, it was always exactly what his garden needed. All weather to him was fine weather. He believed in his garden, loved it, lived in it, was almost part of it. To make excuses for it was to make excuses for himself. Whedon was a genius. But he was mysterious, too. He was one-eyed, and the loss endeared him to the children, relating him also, once or twice removed, to come back Stumper. It touched their imaginations. Being an artist, too, he never told them how he lost it. A pitchfork and a sigh were all he vouchsafed upon the exciting subject. He understood the value of restraint, and left their minds to supply what details they liked best. But this wink of pregnant suggestion, while Leaving them divinely unsatisfied, sent them busily on the search. They imagined the lost object roaming the universe without even an attendant eyelid, able to see things on its own account, invisible things. Whedon's lost eyes about, was a delightful and mysterious threat, while I can see with the gardener's lost eye was a claim to glory no one could dispute, for no one could deny it. Its chief duty, however, was to watch the fruit and vegetables at night, and to keep all robbers, 2-foot, 4-foot, winged or wriggling robbers, from what Aunt Emily called destroying everything. A source of wonder to the children, this competent official was at the same time something of an enigma to the elders. His appearance, to begin with, was questionable, and visitors being shown round the garden had been known to remark upon it derogatively sometimes. It was both in his favour and against him, for either he looked like an untidy parcel of brown paper, loose ends of string straggling out of him, or else, in his Sunday best, was indistinguishable from a rose-bush wrapped up carefully in matting against the frost. Yet in either aspect no one could pretend that he looked anything like that he looked like anything but a genuine head gardener, the spirit of the kitchen garden and the potting shed incarnate. It was the way he answered questions that earned for him the title of enigma. He avoided a direct reply. He was so cautious that he would hesitate even when he came to die. He would think twice about it. The decision to draw the final breath would incapacitate him. He would feel worse, and probably continue alive instead from sheer inability to make up his mind. In all circumstances, owing to his calling doubtless, he preferred to hedge. If Miss Horton asked for celery, he would intimate, "I'll have a look." When Daddy inquired how the asparagus he was doing, he obtained for reply, "Won't you come and see it for yourself, sir?" Upon Mother's anxious enquiry if there would be enough strawberries for the school treat, "Whedon," stated, "It's been a grand year for the berries, ma'am." Then when she felt relieved, he added, "On the whole." For the children, therefore, the gardener was a man of mystery and power. When they saw his figure in the distance with their imagination leaping forward along with their bodies, and "Whedon" stood wrapped in a glory he little guessed. He was bent double, digging, as he usually did in his spare time, for truffles beneath the beech trees. These mysterious delicacies with the awkward name he never found, but he liked looking for them. At first he was so intent upon his endless quest that he didn't hear the approach of footsteps. "Well, no hurry," said the tramp, as they collected round the stooping figure, held their feathers up to warm his back. For the wandering eye had a way of seeing what went on behind him. An empty sack, waiting for the truffles, lay beside him. He looked like an untidy parcel, so he was not in his Sunday clothes. At the sound of voices he straightened slowly and looked round. He seemed pleased with everything, judging by the expression of his eye, yet doubtful of immediate success. "Good morning." Hang on, I need to give the gardener a voice because we haven't spoken to him in long enough that he doesn't have a voice anymore. "Yes, good morning." See, what I want to give him is not a Londoner's drawl, like a drawled English accent, but I don't think I can pull that off. So we'll just give him, "Yes, good morning," he said, touching his speckled cap to the authorities. "Found any?" "Seems a likely spot, maybe. I'm looking." And he closed the mouth of the sack with his foot, lest they should see its emptiness. But the use of the verb set the children off at once. "I say, we're looking too, for somebody who's hiding. Have you seen anyone?" "Someone who's very wonderful? As you pass this way, it's hide and seek, you know." "Whedon" looked more mysterious at once. It was strange how a one-eyed face could express so big a meaning. He scratched his head and smiled. "All my flowers and vegetables is growing nicely. It's a lovely morning for a game." His eye closed and opened. The answer was more direct than usual. It meant volumes. "Whedon" was in the know. They felt him somehow related to their leader, a kind of organized and regulated tramp. "You have seen him, then? With your gone eye, which way? What signs have you got?" "Flowers, beetles, snail shells, caterpillars, anything beautiful's a sign, you know." "Deep?" Tender and kind and beautiful, interposed the tramp, laying the accent significantly on the first adjective, as if for Whedon's special benefit. Whedon looked up. Sounds like my garden thing, he said darkly, more to himself than to the others. He gazed down into the hole he'd been digging. The moist earth glistened in the sunlight. He sniffed the rich, sweet odor of it, and scratched his head in the same spot as before, just beneath the peak of his speckled cap. His nose wrinkled up, and he looked again into the faces, turning his single eye slowly upon each in turn. The tramp's remark had reached his cautious brain. There's no saying where anybody such as yourself, as you describe, might hide himself on a day like this, he observed deliberately, his optic ranging the sunny landscape with approval. I never saw such a beautiful day before, not like today. It's endless, sort of. Seems to me like I've been at this hole for weeks. He paused. The others waited. He paused, and the others waited. Whedon was going to say something very real any moment now, they felt. No hurry. Everything's light and careless, and so are we. There's no longer any time to lose. His voice half sang, half chanted in the slow, windy way he had, and the gardener looked up as if a falling apple had struck him on the head. He shifted from one leg to the other. He seemed excited, moved. His single eye was open to the sun. He looked as if his body was full of light. You was the singer, was you? He asked wonderingly, the tone low and quiet. It was you I heard a-singing, just as dawn broke. He scratched his head again. And me thinking all the time it was a bird, he added to himself. The tramp, for his part, said nothing. Whedon then resumed his ordinary manner. He went on speaking as before, but obviously, somewhere deep down inside himself, he had come to a big decision. Getting nearer and nearer, he resumed his former conversation, exactly where he had left it off. But never enough to get you disappointed, When it gets to the end of anything, you see, it's over, and that's a pity. Uncle Felix glanced at Stumper. Stumper glanced down at the end of his wooden leg. The tramp still said nothing, smiling in his beard, now combed out much smoother than before. It comes to this, my way of thinking at least. He scratched wisdom from another corner of his head. There's a lot of idling going on, no question about that. The great thing is, my way of thinking at any rate, is to just keep on looking. The children met him eagerly at this point, using two favorite words that Aunt Emily strongly disapproved of. Decidedly, and said one, distinctly, claimed the other. That's it, continued Whedon, pulling down his cap to hide, perhaps, the spot where vision would leak out. And talking of signs, I say, find out your own particular sign, and then follow it blindly, to the end. He straightened up, and looked with an air of respectful candor at the others. The decision of his statement delighted them. What doesn't delight me is Library trying to eat some plastic off screen. But we sit here. Yeah. The children felt something of awe in it. Something of their leader's knowledge evidently was in him. Miss Judy, she gets her signs from the air, he said, as no one spoke. Master Tim goes poking along the ground, looking for something with his feet. He feels best that way, feels the earth. Things are growing up, or things what go down into holes. Colonel Sumper, and no offence to you, sir, chooses dark places where the sun forgets to shine. Dangerous jungly places, whispered Tim admiringly. Mr. Felix, he hesitated. Uncle Felix's easiest way of searching seemed to puzzle him. Mr. Felix just messes about all over the place at once, because he sees signs everywhere. Don't know what to follow in particular, for fear of losing himself. Comeback Stumper chuckled audibly, but Uncle Felix asked at once, And you, Whedon? What about yourself, I wonder? The gardener replied without his usual hesitation. It was probably the most direct reply he'd ever made. No one could guess how much it cost him. Underground. My signs lie underground, sir. where the raindrops hide themselves on getting down, and the grubs keep secrets till they feel their wings, where the potatoes and the radishes is," he added, touching his cap with a respectful finger. He went on with a hint of yearning in his tone that made him tremble slightly. "If I could find exactly where and how the potatoes get big down there," he pointed to the earth, "or how my roses get cut out of the dirt, I'd know, wouldn't I, sir? I'd have him fair." The effort exhausted him, it seemed. So deeply was he moved that he had almost gone contrary to his own nature in making such an explicit statement. But he had said something very real at last. It was clear that he was distinctly in the know. Living among natural growing things, he was in touch with life in a deeper sense than they all were. Library is currently laying on my phone, so if the stream starts exploding, please start yelling. But I don't think it will make the stream explode. He's laid on the phone before without any trouble. Anyway, "And me," the tramp mentioned lightly, smiling at his companion of the outdoor life. "Don't leave me out, please. I'm looking like the rest is." Whedon turned round and gazed at him. He wore a strange expression that had respect in it, but there was something more than mere respect. There was a touch of wonder in his eye, a hint of worship almost. But he didn't answer. No word escaped his lips. Instead of speaking, he moved up nearer. He took 3 cautious steps, then halted close beside the great burly figure that formed the center of the little group. And he did a curious and significant little act. He held out both his hands against him, as a man might hold out his hands to warm them before a warm and comforting grate of blazing coals. "Fire," he said, then added, "and I'm much obliged to you." He wore a proud and satisfied air, grateful and happy too. He put his cap straight, picked up his spade, and prepared, without another word, to go on digging for truffles where apparently none existed. He seemed quite content with looking. A pause followed, broken presently by Tim, a whisper addressed to all. "He never finds any. That shows how real it is." "They're somewhere, though," observed Judy. They stood and watched the spade. It went in with a crunching sound, it came out with a sort of poof, and a load of rich black earth slid off it into the world of the sunshine. Went in again and came out again. The rhythm of the movement caught them. How long they watched it no one knew, and no one cared to know. It might have been a moment, it might have been a year or two, so utterly had hurry vanished out of life, it seemed to them that they stood and watched forever, when they became aware of a curious sensation, as though they felt the whole earth turning with them. They were moving, surely. Something to which they belonged, of which they formed a part, was moving. A windy voice was singing just in front of them. They looked up. The words were inaudible, but they knew that it was a bit of the same old song that everyone seemed to be singing everywhere, as though the day itself were singing. And the tramp was going on. "Hark! The birds are singing. Let's go on and look," cried Tim. "The world is wild with laughter," Judy cried, snatching the words from the air about her. "We can fly." She darted after him. "Among the imprisoned hours as we choose," boomed the voice of Uncle Felix as he followed, rolling in behind him. "We can play," growled Stumper, hobbling in next in the line. "My life has just begun." Their leader waited till they all came up with it. They caught him up, gathering about him like things that settled on a sunny bush. It almost seemed that they were one single person, growing from the earth and the air and the water. The tramp glowed there between them like a heart of burning fire. "He ought to be with us too." "No hurry. Let him be. He's following his sign. When he's ready, he'll come along. It's a lovely day, after all." They moved with the rhythm of a flock of happy birds across the field of yellow flowers, singing in chorus something or other about an extra day. 100 years flowed over them, or else a single instant. It mattered not. They took no heed, at any rate. It was so enormous that they lost themselves, yet so tiny that they held it between a finger and a thumb. The important thing was that they were getting warmer. Then Judy suddenly nudged Tim, and Tim nudged Uncle Felix, and Uncle Felix dug his elbow into come back Stumper, and Stumper, somehow or other, caught the attention of the tramp. a sort of panting sound, half whistle and half gasp. They paused and looked behind them. Oh, you posted a codex pic for me. Well, thank you very much, Gariki. That also brings up a. Ooh, yeah, I was thinking something on that line too. I was thinking kind of like a blue adjacent to the back, like the lighter blue adjacent to the background is the accent color, and then like that darker blue works really well. I was gonna aim somewhere between that like darker blue and like almost a purple. I think that would fit really well. I might fiddle that a little bit. The background color fits just fine. I I will have to decide if I want to mask out that background color or keep it. But either way, I like that. That's a good concept. Uh, but that brings up a good point. You can change it, or I can just take it and fiddle. Yeah, I'll poke at it myself because then I can really dial in the colors granularly on my screen. Uh, but that's a great first pass. That's a great starting point, and it won't take much from there. I was not sure where to start with the colors, and that gives me a great starting point. That reminds me, the USG is now the Codex. Is it just Codex or is it the Codex? I'm gonna say both interchangeably. They've changed the name. I had yet to change the logo. If you edit one of the other originals, it'll be less chunky. That's fair. I might just download that and color pick the colors from it and then edit one of the originals. Um, I really like the idea of that text just kind of being logo text. Like I can just codex slash the codex is pretty interchangeable. See, this is much less of an issue than the old name. Uh, I'll probably download like the official image and the one you just sent and do some fiddling with the colors from there. Saying I'm part of Codex sounds weird. It sounds very comic book to my ear. If it's like I am part of Codex, you know, sounds like I'm about to fire a freeze ray at the city. Um, but they've changed the name, so we don't have to argue about whether it's group or guild. We are now Codex. We have a fancy new logo. I don't have it on screen right now, so you're gonna have to deal with me holding up the picture real quick. Here. That's the picture and that's the logo in a nutshell. I really, really love I love the like mouse emitting from the book and like the little highlight color in the E. It's very good. I like it a lot. And I do prefer the new name a good deal. Oh, brain melt. One moment. What else? I had mentioned something else when we were talking about it. It's a group of read. It's still the same group of reading streamers. It's just a big pile of people who read like I do for paper cuts. Um, when's the next book club? It's the end of this month sometime. Book club. When is it? Uh, May 28th. Thank you, Gariki. You are much better at this than me. One of the reasons it took me nearly 2 months to even join the USG was because of the name and logo. That's fair. Yeah, as much as I like the kind of like the previous logo, it looks like something you'd wear like as a patch on like a jacket or something. Uh, I do prefer Codex. Just in a digital environment. I might actually get the old USG logo like embroidered into a patch just because it looks cool. I like the image of that tree growing out of the book, but like I do prefer the name change to Codex. It was very patchy. It looks like something you'd wear like on a button to like a like a convention or something. Uh, but I do prefer the Codex logo and branding just in our in our digital state, and I think it gets across. Uh, it gets across better what we do without being too blunt and too to the point. Plus, it'll work really well as a team name if any of us ever hit partner. Uh, anyway, but yeah, that's the codex in a nutshell. It's a pile of read streamers, and we read a book off stream once a month to show up to book club. And I really should rustle up a copy of Flowers for Algernon and read so I can actually show up May 28th. I might wind up lurking in the book club stream anyway, even if I haven't read Flowers for Algernon, just to show up, because I have a bad habit of being, oh yeah, I should do that, and then I don't do it. Even though I really want to, I actually really like this group. It's a good group of people who do good work. I mean, Gariki's a moderator on the stream, and he's part of it, for crying out loud. Uh, I lost my place. Paused and looked behind him. That's where I was, I think. Yeah, that's pretty close to where I was. He's ready, remarked their leader with a laughing chuckle in his beard. He's coming on. Whedon, sure enough, had quietly shouldered his shovel and empty sack, and was making after them, singing it as he came. Judy was on the point of saying to her brother, "Good thing Aunt Emily's in here," when she caught a look in his eyes that stopped her dead. Aunt Emily finds herself. That's part 8 of the extra day. All the characters we've been mentioning, they all come back. "My dear," he exclaimed in his tone of big discovery. Judy made a movement like a swan that inspects the world behind its back. She tried to look everywhere at once. It seemed she did so. "Gracious me!" she cried. She instinctively chose prohibited words. "My gracious me!" For the places of the world had marvelously shifted and run into one another somehow. A place called somewhere else was close about her, and standing in the middle of it was a figure. Both place and figure ought to have been somewhere else by rights. Judy's surprise, however, was quite momentary. Swift, bird-like understanding followed it. Place was a sham and humbug, really. Already, without leaving the schoolroom carpet, she and Tim had been to the metropolis, and even to the east. This was merely another of these things she didn't know she knew. She understood another thing she didn't understand. She believed. The rest of the party had disappeared inside the wood. Only Tim remained, pointing at this figure outlined against these trees. But these trees belonged to a place her physical eyes had never seen. Perhaps they were part of her mental picture of it. The figure, anyhow, barred the way. It was a woman, the last person in the world they wished to see just then. The face wearing an expression. Excuse me. The face, wearing an expression as though it tried to be happy when it felt it ought not to be, was pointed. Chin, ears, and eyebrows pointed. Nose pointed too, round doors and 2 corners. An elastic nose. There was a look of struggling sweetness about the thin, light lips. The entire expression, from the colorless eyes down to the tip of the decided chin, was one of marked reproach and disapproval, that at the same time fought with an effort to be understanding, gentle, and wise. The face wanted to be very nice, but it was prevented by itself. It was pathetic. Its owner was dressed in a black, small, neat bonnet, fastened carefully on the head, an umbrella in one hand, and big galoshes on both feet. They were gold glasses balanced on the nose. She smiled at them, but with a smile that prophesied rebuke. Before she spoke a word, her entire person said distinctly, "No." "Oh, bother," Tim muttered beneath his breath, and added, "It's her." Already he felt guilty, something he hadn't done, but might do presently. The figure's mere presence invited him to break all rules. "We thought," exclaimed Judy, trying to remember what rules she had just disobeyed, and almost saying, "hoped. We thought you were at Turnbridge Wells." And then with an effort she put in, "Auntie." Yet about the new arrival was a certain flustered and uneasy air, as though she were caught in something she wished to hide. At any rate, she would not willingly confess to. One hand, it was noticed, she kept stiffly behind her back. "Children," she uttered in an emphatic voice, half surprised remonstrance, half automatic rebuke. "I am astonished." Oh, I can't hold that character voice. She pursed her lips more tightly, and gazed at the pair of culprits as though she had hoped better things of them, and again had been disappointed. "You know quite well that this is out of bounds." It came out like an arrow, darting. "We were looking for someone," began Tim, but in a tone that added plainly enough that it wasn't you. "Who's hiding, you see," quoth Judy, "but expecting us at once." The delay annoyed her. "You are both aware," Aunt Emily went on, ignoring their excuses as in duty bound, "that your parents would not approve, at this hour of the morning, too. You ought to be fast asleep in bed if your father knew." Yet, strange to say, the children felt that they loved her suddenly. For the first time in their lives they thought her lovable. A kind of understanding sympathy woke in them. There was something pitiable about her. For obviously she was looking just as they were, but looking in such a silly way, and in such hopelessly stupid places. All her life she'd been looking like this, dressed in crackling black, wearing a prickly bonnet and heavy galoshes, and carrying a useless umbrella that, of course, must bother her. It was disappointment that made her talk as she did, but it was natural she should feel disappointment, for it never rained when she had her umbrella, and her galoshes were always coming off. "She's stuck in a hole, and so she just says things at us. She hurts herself somewhere. She's tired," thought Tim. "She has to be like that," thought Judy. "It's really all pretending, old thing." But Aunt Emily was not aware of what she felt, or rather, Aunt Emily was not aware of what they felt. They were out of bed, and it was her duty to find fault. They were out of bounds, and she must take note of it. So she prepared to scold a little. Her bonnet waggled ominously. She gripped her umbrella. She spoke as though it was very early in the morning, almost dawn, as though the sun were rising. There was confusion in her as to the time of day, it seemed. But the children didn't notice this. They were so accustomed to being rebuked by her that the actual words made small impression. She was just saying things. They were often very muddled things. The attitude, not the meaning, counted. And her attitude, they divined, was subtly different. "You know this is forbidden. It's damp and chilly. It's sure to rain presently. You'll get your feet wet. You should keep to the gravel paths. They're plain enough, are they not?" She looked about her, sniffling, a sniff that usually summoned disasters in a flock. "Oh, yes, and they look like brown sugar, we thought." "It does not matter what you thought, Timothy. The paths are made on purpose to be walked upon and used." "They're beautifully made," interrupted Judy, unable to keep silent longer. "We didn't made them for us." "And we've used them all," exclaimed Tim. "Only come to an end of them. We're done with them, the paths." The way he uttered the substantives made it instantly sound ridiculous. Aunt Emily opened up her mouth to say something, then closed it again without saying it. She stared at them instead. They watched her. All fear of her had left their hearts. A new expression rose, struggling upon her pointed features. She fidgeted from one foot to the other. They felt her as auntie, a poor old muddled thing, always looking in ridiculous places without the smallest notion she was wrong. Tim saw her suddenly all dressed up on purpose as for a game. Judy thought, "She's bubbling inside, really." "There's weed in there," Tim mentioned, pointing to the wood behind her. Something uncommonly like a smile passed into Aunt Emily's eyes, then vanished as suddenly as it came. Judy thought it was like a bubble that burst the instant it reached the sunlight on the surface of a pond. "And how often," came the rebuke, automatically rather, "has your mother told you not to be familiar with a gardener? Play if you want to, but do not play with your inferiors. Play with your Uncle Felix, with Colonel Stumper, or with me." Another bubble had risen, caught the sunshine, and reflected all the colors of the prism, then burst and vanished into airy spray. "But they're looking with us," Tim insisted eagerly. We're all looking for something together. Uncle Felix, comeback stumper, everybody. It's wonderful. Never ends. Aunt Emily's hand, still clutching the umbrella, stole up and put her bonnet straight. It was done to gain a little more time, apparently. There was a certain hesitation in her. She seemed puzzled. She betrayed excitement, too. "Looking, are you?" she exclaimed, and her voice held a touch of mellowness that was new. "Looking?" She stopped. She tried to hide the mellowness by swallowing it. "Yes. There's someone hiding. It's hide and seek, you see. We're the seekers. It's enormous. Will you come with us and look too?" Then, while Aunt Emily's lips framed themselves, as from long habit, into a negative or a reprimand, the children continued before either reached a livery. "There are heaps of signs about. Anything lovely or beautiful is a sign that we're getting warm. We've each got ours. Mine's air. What's yours, Auntie?" Aunt Emily stared at them. Her bewilderment increased, apparently. She swallowed hard again. The children returned her stare, gazing innocently into her questioning eyes as if she were some strange bird at the zoo. The new feeling of kinship with her grew stronger in their hearts. They knew quite well that she was looking just as they were. Really, she longed to play their game of hide and seek. She was very ignorant, of course, they saw, but they were ready and willing to teach her how to play, and would make it easy for her into the bargain. "Signs," she repeated, in a voice that was gentler than they'd ever known it. There was almost a sound of youth in it. Judy suddenly realized that Aunt Emily had once been a girl. A softer look shone in the colorless eyes, the lips relaxed. In a hat she might have even been pretty. No one in a bonnet could be jolly. "Signs, deep and beautiful, whatever in the world." She stopped abruptly, startled by the exquisite trilling of a bird that was perched upon a branch close behind her. The liquid notes poured out in a stream of music, so rich, so lovely, that it seemed as if no bird had ever sung before, and they were the first persons in the world who had ever heard it. "My sign!" cried Judy, dancing round her disconcerted and bewildered relative. "One of my signs, that!" "Mine's rabbits and rats and badgers," Tim called out with ungrammatical emphasis. "Anything that likes the earth is mine." He looked about him as if to point one out to her. "They're everywhere, all over the place," he added, seeing none at the moment. "Auntie, what's yours? Do tell us, then we can go and look together. It's much more fun than looking alone." No answer came, but caught by the astounding magic of the singing bird, Aunt Emily had turned, and in doing so the hand behind her back became visible for the first time since their meeting. The children saw it simultaneously. They nudged each other, but they said no word. Sorry, there was a noise outside that startled me a little bit. Huh. Okay, the children saw it simultaneously. They nudged each other, but they said no word. The same moment, having failed to discover the bird, Aunt Emily turned back again. She looked caught, they thought, but she also looked as if she had found something herself. The secret joy she had tried to hide from them by swallowing it rose now to her wrinkled cheeks and shone in both her eyes, then overflowed and rippled down toward her trembling mouth. The lips were trembling. She smiled, but so softly, sweetly, that 10 years dropped from her like a dissolving shadow, and the hand she had so long kept hidden behind her back stole forth slowly into view. "How did you guess that I was looking for anything?" she inquired, plaintively, in an excited yet tremulous tone. "I thought no one knew it." She seemed genuinely surprised, yet unbelievably happy, too. A great sigh of relief escaped her. "We're all the same, so you are too," one of them informed her. "Everybody's looking." And they crowded round to examine the objects in her hand. A dirty, earth-stained trowel, and a fern. They never knew she collected ferns on the sly, but never before they, or rather they did know. They knew that she collected ferns on the sly, but never before had they seen her bring home such a prize. Usually she found only crumpled things like bits of wrinkled brown paper which she called specimens. This one was marvelously beautiful. It had a dainty, slender stalk of ebony black, and its 100 tiny leaves quivered like a shower of green water drops in the air. Hang on. Are my car's lights on? No, they're not. Okay, I thought I saw them on for a moment, and I was very concerned because I had turned them off earlier. Easily distracted tonight, uh-huh. There was actual joy in every trembling bit of it. "That's my sign," announced Aunt Emily with pride. "Maidenhair. It'll grow again. I've got the roots." And she said it as triumphantly as Stumper had said snail shell. "Of course, Auntie," Judy cried. Yet doubtful. "You ought to know." She twiddled it round in her fingers till the quivering fronds emitted a tiny sound. "And you can use it as a feather, too." She lowered her head to listen. "We've each got a feather," mentioned Tim. "It's a compass. Shows the way, you know. You hear him calling that way." "The tramp explained that. He's leader. Come on, Auntie. We ought to be off. The others went ages ago. We're going to the end of the world. They've already started." For a moment Aunt Emily looked as rigid as the post beside a 5-barred gate. The old unbending attitude took possession of her once again. Her eyes took on the tint of soapy water, her elastic nose looked round the corner, and she frowned. Her black dress crackled. The mention of a tramp and the end of the world woke all her savage educational instincts visibly. "He's a singing tramp, and he shines like a Christmas tree," explained Judy. "He looks like everybody in the world. He's extraordinary." She turned to her brother. "Doesn't he, Tim?" Tim ran up and caught his aunt by the umbrella hand. He saw her stiffening. He meant to prevent it if he could. "Everybody rolled into one," he agreed eagerly. "Daddy and Mother and the clergyman and you." "And me." "Rather, as you are now, rabbity and nice." Aunt Emily slowly removed one big galosh, then waited. "Cleaned up and young, and smells delicious, like flowers and hay, and soft and warm, and sings and dances, and is positive if we go on looking, we shall find exactly what we're looking for." Aunt Emily removed the other galosh, a shade more quickly than the first one. She kicked it off. The stiffness melted out of her, and she smiled again. "Well, she began, when Judy stood on tiptoe and whispered in her ear some magic sentence. "Dawn, at dawn, when the birds begin to sing." Something had caught her heart and squeezed it. Tim and Judy nodded vehemently in agreement. Aunt Emily dropped her umbrella then, and at the same moment a singing voice became audible in the trees behind them. The song came floating to them through the sunlight with a sound of wind and birds. It had a marvelous quality, very sweet and very moving. There was a lilt in it, a happy, laughing lilt, as though the earth herself were singing of the spring. And Aunt Emily made one last vain attempt. She struggled to put her fingers in her ears, but the children held her hands. She crackled and made various oppressive and objecting sounds, but the song poured into her in spite of all her efforts. Her feet began to move upon the grass. It was awful. It was shocking. It was forbidden, against all rules and regulations. Yet Aunt Emily danced. And a thin, plaintive voice, like the voice of a long-forgotten youth, slipped out between her faded lips, and positively sang. "The world is young with laughter. We can fly among the imprisoned hours as we choose." But to Tim and Judy it all seemed merely right and natural. "Come on!" cried the boy, pulling his aunt toward the wood. "We can look together now. You've got your sign," exclaimed Judy, tugging at her other hand. "Everything's free and careless. So are we." "Aim for a path," Tim shouted by way of concession. "Want to go quicker on a path." But Auntie was nothing, if not decided. "I know a shortcut. Paths are for people who don't know the way. There's no time to lose." "Dear me, I'm warm already." She dropped her umbrella, and, actually dancing and singing, she led the way into the wood, holding the fern out before her like a wand, and happy as a girl let out of school. But as they went, Judy, suddenly knowing another thing she didn't quite know, made a discovery of her own, an immense discovery. It was bigger than anything Tim had ever found. It was bigger than anything ever Tim had found. She felt so light and swift and winged by it that she seemed almost to melt into the air herself. I say, Tim. Yes. She took her eyes from the sky to see what her feet were doing. Tim lifted his from the earth to see what was going on above him in the air. I know what, she announced. What? He was not particularly interested, it seemed. Judy paused. She dropped a little behind her dancing aunt. And Tim joined her. It happened all as quickly as a man might snap his fingers. Aunt Emily, her heart full of growing ferns, noticed nothing. We found her out. What she really is, I mean, whispered Judy, communicating her immense discovery. He agreed and nodded. It did not strike him as anything wonderful or special. Yes, rather. He didn't grasp her meaning, perhaps. But his sister was bursting with excitement, radiant, shivering almost with the wonder of it. Don't you see? It's a sign, she exclaimed so loud that Aunt Emily almost heard it. She's found herself. She was hiding from herself. That's part of it all. The game, the biggest sign of all. She was so warm she burned all over. Yes, I see, repeated Tim, but he wasn't particularly impressed. He merely wanted his aunt to find an enormous fern whose roots were growing in the sweet, sticky earth that he loved. Her sign was a fern, and his was the ground. It made him understand Aunt Emily at last, and therefore love her, but he saw no further than that. Judy, however, knew. She suddenly understood what the tramp meant by deep. She also knew now why Stumper, Weirden, Uncle Felix, too, looked at him so strangely, with wonder and respect, with love. Something about the tramp explained each one to himself. Each one found himself. And she, without realizing it before, had acquired this power too, though only in a small degree as yet. The tramp believed in everybody. She, without knowing it, believed in her aunt. It was another thing she didn't know she knew. And the real, long-buried, deeply hidden Aunt Emily had emerged accordingly. All her life she'd been hiding from herself. She'd found herself at last. It was the biggest sign of all. Tim caught her hand and dragged her after. Come on, we're getting frightfully warm. Look at Auntie. Listen, will you? Aunt Emily, a little way in front of them, was digging busily with her dirty trowel. Her bonnet was crooked, her skirts tucked up, her white worsted stockings splashed with mud, her elastic-sided boots scratched and plastered. And she was singing to herself in a thin but happy voice that was not unlike an old and throaty corncrake. The birds are singing, hark! Come out and play. Life is an endless search. I've just begun. They listened for a little while, and then ran headlong up to join her. Okay. Let me check the table of contents real quick. Okay, yeah, we have two more parts of the extra day of the chunk of the book that is the extra day, and then we have 1, 2, 3 chapters after that. So we will polish off the mini chunk of the book that is the extra day, and then we'll take intermission. How's that sound? Anyway, let's continue. Let's continue with Signs Everywhere. 9. And it was somewhere about here and now. The exact spot impossible to determine, since it was obviously a circular experience without beginning, middle, or end, that the gigantic character of the day declared itself in all its marvelous simplicity. For as they dived deeper and deeper toward its center, they discovered that its center, being everywhere at once, existed, well, nowhere. The sun was always rising somewhere. In other words, each seeker grasped, in his or her own separate way, that the splendor hiding from them lay actually both too near and too far away for any individual eye to see it with completeness. Someone, indeed, had come, but this someone, as Judy told herself, was simply all over the place. To see him distinctly is an awful job, according to Uncle Felix, or as Comeback Stumper realized in the middle of another clump of bramble bushes, perspective is necessary to proper vision. He lay too close before their eyes to be discovered fully. Tim had long ago described it instinctively as an enormous hide, but it was more than that. It was a universal hide. Alone, perhaps, Whedon's last optic, wandering ubiquitously and enjoying the bird's-eye view, possessed coveted power, but like the stars, though somewhat about, it was invisible. Whedon made no reference to it. He attended to one thing at a time. He lived in the present. One eye was gone. He just looked for truffles with the other. Yet while this did not damp their ardor in the least, it increased it rather. The gathering of the clues became more and more absorbing. Though not seen, the hider was both known and felt. His presence was a certainty. There was no real contradiction. For signs grew and multiplied, till the entire world seemed overflowing with them, and hardly could the earth contain them. They brimmed the sunny air, flooded the ponds and streams, lay thick upon the fields, and almost choked the woods to stillness. They trickled out, leaked through, dripped over everywhere in color, shape, and sound. The hider had passed everywhere, and upon everything had left his exquisite and deathless traces. The inanimate as well as the animate world had known in the various touches of his great passing. His trail had blazed the entire earth about them, for the very clouds were dipped in snow and gold, and the meanest pebble in the lane wore a self-conscious gleam of sterling silver. So-called domestic creatures also seemed aware that a stupendous hiding-place was somewhere near. The browsing cow, contented and at ease, the horse that nuzzled their hands across the gate, the very pigs, grubbing eternally for food, yet eternally unsatisfied. All these, this endless morning, were an unaccustomed look to someone they knew, and so were glad to be alive. Some knew more than others, of course. The cat, for instance, in defending its kittens, single-pawed against the stable-dog, who pretended to be ferocious. The busy Father Blackbird, passing worms to his mate for the featherless mites, all beak and clamor in the nest, the clouded yellow sharing a spray of honeysuckle with a bumblebee, and the honeysuckle offering no resistance. One and all, they were also aware in their differing degrees. And the seekers, noting the signs, grew warmer and ever warmer. An ordinary day, these signs, owing to their generous profusion, might have called for no remark. They would probably have drawn no attention to themselves, merely lying about unnoticed, undiscovered, because of familiarity. But this was not an ordinary day. It was unused, unspoilt, and unrecorded. It was the some day of humanity's long dream, an extra day. Time could not carry it away. It couldn't end. All it contained was of eternity. The great hider at the heart of it all was real. These signs, deep, tender, kind, and beautiful, were part of him, and in knowing, recognizing them, they knew and recognized him too. They drew near, that is, brushed up closer, to his hiding place from which he saw them. They approached within knowing distance of a reality that each in his or her particular way had always yearned for. They held, oh, distinctly held, that they were winning. They won the marvelous game as soon as it began, and they had never a doubt about the end. But their supreme, superb discovery was this. They had always secretly longed to find the elusive hider. They now realized that he had wanted them to find him, and that from his hiding place he saw them easily. That was the most wonderful thing of all. To describe the separate adventures of each seeker would involve a series of bulky trilogies no bookshelves in the world could carry. They can, besides, be adequately told in 3 simple words that Tim used, shouted with an intense enthusiasm when he tripped over a rabbit hole and tumbled headlong against the everlasting tramp. "I'm still looking." He dived away into another hole. "I'm looking still." "So am I," or rather, "So am I," the tramp answered, also in 3 words. "I'm very warm." growled Stumpler. "I'm getting on." "I'm getting on," Aunt Emily piped. And while Judy was forever shouting, "I found him," Uncle Felix, puffing and panting, could only repeat with rapture each time he met another seeker, "A lovely day, a lovely day." They said so little, experienced and felt so much. From time to time, too, others joined them in the tremendous game. It seemed the personality of the tramp attracted them. Something about him, his sincerity, perhaps, or his simplicity, made them realize suddenly what they were about, as though they had not noticed it before, not understood it quite at any rate. And they found themselves. He did and said so little, but he possessed the unique quality of a leader, natural persuasion. Thompson, for instance, cleaning the silver of the pantry window, looked up and saw them pass. They caught him unawares. His pompous manner hung like a discarded mask on a nail beside his livery. He wore his black and white striped waistcoat and an apron. Of course he looked proper, as an old family servant was ought to look, but he looked cheerful, too. He was humming to himself as he polished up the covers and the candelabra. "Well, I never," he exclaimed as the line of them filed by. "I never did. And Mr. Whedon with them, too." The tramp passed singing and looked through the open window at the butler. No more than that. Their eyes met between the bars. They exchanged glances, but something incalculable happened in that instant, just as it had happened to Stumper, Aunt Emily, and the rest of them. Thompson put several questions into his look of sheer astonishment. "Why not?" the tramp replied, chuckling as he caught the butler's eye. "It's a lovely morning. We're just looking." Thompson was flabbergasted, as if all the old-fashioned families of the world had suddenly praised him. All his life he had done nothing. He had never done anything but his ordinary duty. "It's holiday time," said Whedon, coming next. "All my flowers and vegetables is a-growing nicely." He, too, seemed singing, dancing. Something had happened. The whole world seemed out and playing. Thompson forgot himself in a most unusual way, forgot that he was an old family servant, that the apron string met round his middle with difficulty, that the authorities were away, and his responsibilities increased thereby. Forgot, too, that for 20 years he'd been answering bells, overhearing conversations without pretending to do so, and that visitors wanted hot water and early tea at 7:30 sharp. He remembered very suddenly that he was a man. He was very fond of someone. The birds were singing, the sun was shining, the flowers were out upon the lawn, and it was spring. An amazing longing in him woke and stirred to life. There was a singular itching in his feet. Something in his butler heart began to purr. "Looking, eh? There's something I've been looking for, too. I'd forgotten about it. No one could make the silver shine as I can," he mumbled, watching the retreating figures. "But it is about finished now," and he glanced down at it with pride. "Fit to set on the table. Why shouldn't I take a turn in the garden, too?" He looked out a moment. The magic of the spring came upon him suddenly like a revelation. He knew he was alive, that there was something he wanted somewhere, something real and satisfying. If only he could find it, find out what it was. For 20 years he'd been living automatically. Alfred Thompson suddenly felt free and careless. The butler yearned. He hesitated, gave the dish cover an extra polish, then called through the door to Mrs. Horton. There's a tramp in the garden, Miss Bridget. Mr. Whedon's with him. Mr. Felix is also taking the air, and Master Tim—" He stopped, hearing a step in the pantry. Miss Horton stood behind him with a shawl about her shoulders. Her red face was smiling. "Alfred, let's go out and take a look," she said. "Mary can see to the shepherd's pie. I've been as quick as I could," she added, as if excusing herself. Moreover, she said distinctly, "Shepherd's pie?" "I haven't been calling," replied the butler, "except only just now, just this moment." He spoke as though he was being scolded for not answering a bell. But he cast such an admiring glance, half wild, half reckless, at the cook. "And you're shouting to me to come this last half hour and more," cried Miss Horton. She, too, apparently was in a state. "You are mistaken, Bridget. I have been singing, as I often do when attending the silver, but as for... You can do without a hat. Come on, I want to go and look for... She broke off, taking his arm as though they were going down the Strand or Oxford Street. Her red face beamed. She looked very proud and happy. She wanted to look for something too, but she couldn't believe that the moment had really come. She had put it away so long, like a special dish in a cupboard. Sorry, there's library fur floating around. Wanted to get it on my face. I tried to get it out of my face, and some of it got on my tongue anyway. I don't know what's come over me, she went on, very confidentially, as she moved beside him through the scullery door. But I don't feel satisfied. Not satisfied with myself as I used to be. Now, Bridget, it was in his best 7:30 manner. There was a struggle in him. No, said Miss Horton with decision. I give satisfaction, that I know. Well, we both do that, said Thompson proudly. No one can do a suet pudding to a turn as you can. Only the other day I heard Sir William was speaking of it. She held his arm more tightly. They were on the lawn by now. The flood of sunlight caught them, showed up the worn and shabby places in his suit of broadcloth, and gleamed on her bursting shoes she fancied for her kitchen work. They heard the birds, they smelt the flowers, the air bathed them over like a sea. And the silver, Alfred, who in the world can make look as you do, but what I've been feeling lately, since this morning, that is to say, feeling for the first time in me life, so to speak. Bridget, dear, you've got it, he interrupted with excitement. I felt it too, felt it this morning first when I woke up, remembered that nobody wanted hot water or early tea, and I said to myself, there's more than that in it. I'm not doing all this just only for a salary. I'm doing it for something else. What is it? He spoke very rapidly for a butler. He looked down at her red and smiling face. What is it? He repeated, curiously moved. She looked up at him without a word. It's something hidden, he said after a pause. That's what it is. That's it, like a recipe. There was another pause. The butler broke it. They stood together in the middle of the field, flowers and birds and sunshine all about them. A mystery inside of us, I think. Yes, Alfred. I think it's a song and dance we want, a little life. He broke off abruptly, noticing the sudden movement of her bursting shoes. She took a long step forwards, then sideways. She opened her arms to the air and sun. She almost pirouetted. Life, hot and fiery life, that's it. Hark, Alfred, you hear that singing far away. She felt the Irish break out of her. Listen, she cried, trying to drag him faster. Listen, will you? It makes me wild entirely. Give me your hand. Come on and dance with me. It's in me heart, I feel it, and in me blood. To the devil with me suet pudding. This is not Irish. That's not Irish. That is sliding rapidly into an accent I don't like. To the devil with me suet puddings and the shepherd pies. The singing's real. That's life. That's lovely as a dream. It's what I've been looking for ever since I can remember. I've got it. And Thompson felt himself spinning through the air. Old families were forgotten. The world was young with laughter. They could fly. They did. The silver was beautifully cleaned. He had earned his holiday. That's singing, he gasped, feeling his heart grow big. He followed her across the flowered world. I believe it's a bird. It would surprise me to be told. A bird? Cried Miss Horton, turning him round and round. It's a bird from heaven, then. I've heard it all the morning. It's been singing in my heart for ages. Now it's out. Come follow it with me. We'll go to the end of the world to find it. Her kitchen energy, some called it temper, had developed a greater scope than puddings. There is no hurry, the butler panted, moving along with her, trying hard to keep his balance. We'll look together. We'll find it. And as they raced across the field among the flowers, after the line of disappearing figures, the tramp looked back at them and waved his hand. It's a lovely morning, he said as they came up with the rest of the party. So you're looking too? Too much out of breath to answer, they just nodded, and the group accepted them without more to do. Their object evidently was the same. Aunt Emily glanced up from her ferns, nodded, and said, "Good morning. It's a lovely day," and resumed her digging again. It was like shaking hands. They all went forward happily, eagerly across the wide, wide world together. The absence of surprise the children knew had now become a characteristic everybody shared. All were in the same state together. The whole day flowed. There were no limitations or conditions, least of all surprise. Even Whedon had forgotten hedges and artificial boundaries. No one, therefore, ejaculated nor exclaimed when they ran across the policeman. He too was looking for someone, but having mislaid his notebook and pencil stub, was unable to mention any names, and was easily persuaded to join the body of eager seekers. Being a policeman, he was naturally a seeker by profession. He was always looking for somebody somewhere. Somebody was going in the wrong direction. That's just it, he said, in the moment he saw the tramp, taking his helmet off as though an odd respect was in him. That's just what I've always felt. He went on vaguely. I'm looking for someone who was looking for something else, or my looking's wrong. In the wrong places, admitted Stumper, remembering his Indian scouting days. In the wrong way, put in Uncle Felix, full of experience by now. The policeman listened attentively, as though by rights he ought to enter these sentences laboriously in his notebook. That's it, perhaps. Takes them longer, but they finds out in the end. If I was to show 'em the right way of looking instead of arresting 'em, I'd be real. Then he added, as if he were giving evidence in a court of justice and before a county magistrate, "It's no good looking anywhere where it ain't now, is there?" Precisely, agreed Colonel Stumper, remembering happily that his pockets were full of snail shells. He knew his sign. Thompson, Miss Horton, Whedon, and the policeman glanced at him gratefully, but it was the last mentioned who replied. Because everyone has his own way of looking, he said with a conviction at last. And even the burglar is the only looking wrong. He too, it seemed, had found himself. Their search, their endless hunt, their conversation and adventures thus might be reported endlessly, if only the bookshelves of the world were built more stoutly, and everybody could find an extra day lying about in which to read it all. Each seeker held true to his or her first love, and obeying an infallible instinct. The adventure and romance that hid in Tim and Judy, respectively, sent them headlong after anything that offered signs of these two common but seductive qualities. Judy lived literally in the air, her feet, her heart, her eyes off all the ground. Tim, filled with an equally insatiable curiosity, found adorable danger in every rabbit run and rescued things innumerable. Off the ground he felt unsafe, unsure, and lost himself. Stumper, faithful to his scouting passion, disappeared into all kinds of undesirable places no one else would have dreamed of looking in, yet invariably came back. And while Uncle Felix tried a little of everything and found copy in a puddle or dandelion, Whedon carried his empty sack without a murmur, knowing that it would be filled with truffles at the end. Aunt Emily, exceedingly particular, no longer interfering with the others, was equally sure of herself. A touch of fluid youth ran in her veins again, and in her heart grew a fern that presently she would find everywhere outside as well, a maidenhair. Each, however, in some marvelous way, shared the adventures of the others, as though the tramp merged all 7 of them into one single being, unified them at any rate into this one harmonious common purpose with himself. For while everybody had a different way of looking, everybody's way, for that particular individual, was exactly right. Smell, then follow, was the secret. Find her own sign and stick to it, was the clue. Each sign, though by different routes, led straight toward the marvelous hiding place. To urge one's own sign upon another was merely to delay that other, but to point out better signs of his own particular kind was to send him on faster than before. Thus there was harmony among them all, for every seeker, knowing this, had found himself. The last part of this extra day, part 10, But while there was no hurry, no passing, and most certainly of all no passing away, there was a sense of enormous interval. There were epochs, there were interludes, there was duration. Though everything had just begun, it was yet complete, if not completed. At any point of an adventure that an adventure could be taken over from the very start, the experience of holding all the thrill and wonder of the first time. Cake could be had and eaten too. Tim, halfway down a rabbit hole, could instantly find himself at the opening again, bursting with all the original excitement of trembling calculations. With the others it was similar. There was no end to anything. Yet there was this general consciousness of gigantic interval. It turned in a circle round them, everywhere. They came together then, all 8 of them, into that place of singular enchantment known as the end of the world, sitting in a group about the prostrate elm that on ordinary days was home. What they had been doing each one knew assuredly, even if no one mentioned it. Tim, who had been to India with Comeback Stumper, had a feeling in his heart that expressed itself in one word, everywhere, accompanied by a sigh of happy satisfaction. Judy felt what she knew as neverness. She'd seen the metropolis inside out with Uncle Felix, apparently. And these 2 couples sat now side by side upon the tree, gazing contentedly at the colony of wallflowers that flamed in the sunshine just above their heads. "Whedon!" Cleaning his spade with a great nailed boot, turned his good eye affectionately upon the sack that lay beside him, full now to bursting. Aunt Emily breathed on her gold-rimmed glasses, rubbed them and put them on her elastic nose, then looked about her peacefully yet expectantly, ready, it seemed, to start again at any moment, anywhere. She guarded carefully a mossy bundle in her black silk lap. A little distance from her, Thompson was fastening a flower into Miss Horton's dress, and close to the gate stood the policeman, smoking a pipe and watching everybody with obvious contentment. His belt was loose, both hands stuck into it. He leaned against the wooden fence. On the ground, between the tree and the fence, the tramp had made a fire. He lay crouched about it. He and the fire belonged to one another. It seemed that he was dozing. And in this sense of lying, in the heart of an enormous circular interval, it touched everybody with delicious peace. Each had apparently found something real, and was content merely to lie and be with it. All came gradually to sitting or reclining postures. Yet there was no sense of fatigue. Any instant they would be up again and looking. Occasionally one or the other of them spoke, but it was not the kind of speech that struggled to express difficult ideas with tedious sentences of many words. There was very little to say. Mere statements of indubitable reality could be so easily and briefly made. "Now," said Tim, unafraid of contradiction. "Then," said Judy, equally certain of herself. "Now then," declared Uncle Felix, positive at last of something. "Naturally," affirmed Aunt Emily. "Of course," growled Comeback Stump. And while Whedon, looking contentedly at his bursting sack, put in, "always," the policeman, without referring to his notebook, added from the fence, "That's right." The remarks of Thompson and Miss Horton were not audible, for they were talking to one another like some little distance away, beside the rubbish heap, but their conversation seemed equally condensed and eloquent, judging by the satisfied expression on their faces. Thompson probably said, "Well," the cook adding, "I never." The tramp, stretched out beside his little fire of burning sticks, however, said more than any of them. He also said it shortly as the children. There never was any question who was leader. "Yes," he mentioned in a whisper that flowed about them with a sound like singing wind. It summed up everything in a single word, made them warm as though a little flame had touched them. All the languages of the world, using all their sentences at once, could have said no more than that consummate syllable, in the way he said it. "Yeah." It was the word the whole day uttered. For this was perfectly plain. Each of the group, having followed his or her particular sign to the end of the world, now knew exactly where the hider lay. The supreme discovery was within reach at last. They were merely waiting, waiting in order to enjoy the revelation all the more, and waiting in an ecstasy of joy and wonder. 7 or 8 of them were gathered together. The hiding place was found. It was now and then, and natural and always, and right. It was yes. And life had just begun. There happened then a vivid and amazing thing. All rose as one being and stood up. The tramp alone remained lying beside his little fire, but the others stood and listened. The precise nature of what happened none of them, perhaps, could explain. It was too marvelous. It was possibly the thing that nobody understands, possibly the thing they didn't know they knew, and yet they both knew and understood it. To each, apparently, the hiding place was simultaneously revealed. Their signs summoned them, the hider called. Yet all they heard was the singing of a little bird. Invisible somewhere above them, in the sea of blazing sunshine, it poured its heart out, rapturously, with a joy and a passion of life that seemed utterly careless as to whether it was heard or not. It merely sang because it was alive. To Judy, at any rate, this seemed what they heard. To the others it came, apparently, otherwise. Their interpretations, at any rate, were various. Thompson and Mrs. Horton were the first to act. Hang on, something is beeping. Let me go fix this. Why are people beeping? Because my car decided to turn on its lights. Apologies. Just things are happening outside. I was just worried like something was occurring. Like someone was trying to get my attention with that. No, just things are occurring. Worry not. Apologies. There we go. Their interpretations at any rate were various. Thompson and Mrs. Horton were the first to act. The latter looked about her, sniffling the air. "It's burning. Maybe you don't know enough. That's my job, anyhow," and moved off in the direction of the house with an energy that had nothing of displeasure nor of temper in it. It was apparently crackling that she heard. Thompson went after her, a willing alacrity in his movements that yet showed no sign of undignified hurry. I'll be at the door in no time," he was heard to say, "for it stopped ringing. I shouldn't wonder." There was a solemn joy in him. He spoke as though he heard a bell. "We done," turned very quietly and watched their disappearing figures. He shouldered his heavy sack of truffles and his spade. No one asked him anything aloud, but in answer to several questioning faces, he mumbled cautiously, though in a satisfied and pleasant voice, "My garden wants me. Maybe I'll have a look," obviously going off to water the apricots and rose trees. He heard the dry leaves rustle, possibly. "Keep to the gravel paths," said Aunt Emily, adjusting her gold glasses. "They're dry," then changed her sentence, smiling to herself. "They're so beautifully made, I mean." And gathering up her bundle of living ferns, she walked briskly over the broken ground, then straight across the lawn, waving her trowel at them as she vanished in the shade below the lime trees. The shade, however, seemed deeper than before. It concealed her quickly. "I'll be moving on now," came the deep voice of the policeman. He opened the gate in the fence and consulted a notebook as he did so. He passed slowly out of sight, closing the gate behind him, carefully. His heavy tramp became audible on the road outside, the road leading to the metropolis. "There's someone asking the way." His voice was audible for a moment, before it died into the distance. The road, the gateway, the fence were not so clear as hitherto, but a trifle dim. These various movements took place all so quickly. It seemed they all took place at once, even. Judy still heard the bird, however. She heard nothing else. It was singing everywhere, the sky full of its tender and delicious song, but the notes were a little, just a little, further away, she thought. Nor could she see it anyway. It was then that Comeback Stumper, limping a trifle as usual, approached them. He looked troubled, rather, and though his manner was full of confidence still, his mind had mild confusion in it somewhere. He joined Uncle Felix and the children, standing in front of them. "Listen," he said in a low, gruff voice. He held out an open palm, 3 snail shells in it, signifying they should take one each. "Listen," he repeated, and put the smallest shell against his own ear. "You hear that curious sound?" His head was cocked sideways, one ear pressed tight against the shell, the other open to the sky. "Ganges," he mumbled to himself after an interval. "Stones are moving in the riverbed, that long, withdrawing roar." He was about to add, "down the naked shingles of the world," when Felix interrupted him. "Grating," he said, listening intently to his shell. "Metallic grating sound. What is it?" There was apprehension in his tone, a touch of sadness. "It's getting louder, too." "Footsteps. 2 feet, not 4. It's not a badger or a rabbit," he went on with sudden conviction. "It's coming nearer." There was disappointment and alarm in him. "Well, it might be a badger, perhaps." "What are you singing?" cried Judy breathlessly. "Nothing but singing. It's a bird." Her face was radiant. "It's a long way off, though." They put their shells down then, and listened without them. They all glanced from one another to the sky, all heads cocked sideways. And they heard the sound distinctly, somewhere in the air about them. It had changed a little. It was louder. It was coming nearer. "Metallic," repeated Uncle Felix with an ominous inflection. "Machinery," growled Stumper, a fury rising in his throat. Clicking, agreed Tim. He looked uneasy. "I only hear a bird, but it comes and goes, rather." Then the tramp, still lying beside his little fire of burning sticks, put in a word. "It's we who are going," he said in his singing voice. "We're moving on again." They heard him quite well enough, but they didn't understand what he meant, and his voice died into the distance, oddly, far away already, almost on the other side of the fence. And as he spoke, they noticed another change in the world about them. 3 of the party noticed it. The males, Uncle Felix, Tim, and Comeback Stumper. For the light was fading. It was getting darker. There was a slight sense of chill, a growing dimness in the air. They realized vaguely that the tramp was leaving them, and that with him went the light, the heat, the brilliance out of their happy day. They turned with one accord towards him. He still lay there beside his little fire, but he seemed further off. Both his picture and the burning sticks looked like a picture seen at the end of a corridor, an interminable corridor, edged and framed by gathering shadows that were about to cover it. They stretched their hands out, they called to him, they moved their feet. For the first time this wonderful day there was hurry in them, but the receding figure of the tramp withdrew still further and further until an inaccessible distance intervened. They heard him singing faintly, "There is no hurry, life has just begun. The world is young with laughter, we can fly." But the words came sighing toward them from the inaccessible region where he lay, thousands of years ago, millions of miles away, millions of miles. "You won't forget." That was the last thing they caught. "You know how. You'll never forget." When a sudden cry of joy and laughter sounded close beside them, they turned to see Judy standing on tiptoe, stretching her thin, slim body as if trying to reach the moon. The light was dim. It seemed the sun had set, and moonlight lay upon the world. But her figure, bright and shining, stood in a patch of brilliant radiance by herself. She looked like a white flame of fire ascending. "I've got it! I got it!" Her voice was wild with happiness, almost like the singing of a bird. The others stared, then came up close. But while Tim ran, Stumper and Uncle Felix moved more slowly. Something in them hesitated. Their attitudes betrayed them. There was a certain confusion in the minds of the older two, a touch of doubt. The contrast between the surrounding twilight and the brilliant patch of glory in which Judy stood bewildered them. The long, slim body of the child, every line of her figure, from her toes to the crown of her flying hair, pointing upwards in a stream of shining aspiration, was irresistible, however. She looked like a lily growing, nay, rushing upwards to the sun. They followed the direction of her outstretched arms and hands, but it was Tim who spoke first. He did not doubt as they did. "Oh, Judy, where?" he cried out passionately. "Show me, show me!" The child raised herself even higher, stretching her toes and arms and hands. Her fingers lengthened. She panted. She made a tremendous effort. "There," she said, without looking down. Her face was towards the sky. Her throat stretched till the muscles showed, and her hair fell backwards in a stream. Then, following the direction of her eyes and pointing fingers, the others saw for the first time what Judy saw. A small wild rose hung shining in the air, dangling at the end of a little bending branch. The bush grew out of the rubbish heap, clambering up the wall. No one had noticed it before. At the end of the branch hung the single shining blossom, swinging a little in the wind. But it was just out of reach, a shade too high for her eager fingers to take hold of it. Beyond it grew the colony of wallflowers, also in the curious light that seemed the last glory of that fading day. But it was the rose that Judy wanted, and from somewhere near it came the sweet singing of the unseen bird. "Too high," whispered Uncle Felix, watching in amazement. "You can't manage it. You'll crick your back. Oh!" The sight of that blossom drew his heart out. "Impossible," growled Stumper. Growled Stumper, yet wondering why he said it. "It's out of reach." Go on. You'll have it in a second. Half an inch more. There, you touched it that time," cried Tim. For an interval no one could measure, they watched her, spellbound. In each of them stirred the similar instinct that they could reach it, but that she could not. A deep, secret desire hid in all of them to pick that gleaming wild rose that swung above them in the air. And meanwhile the darkness deepened perceptibly. Only Judy and the blossom framed still in shining light. Then suddenly the child's voice broke forth again like a burst of music. "I've got it! I've got it!" There was a breathless pause. Her finger didn't stretch a fraction of an inch, but the rose was nearer, for the bird that still sang invisibly had fluttered into view and perched itself deliberately upon the prickly branch. It lowered the rose toward the human hands. It hopped upon the twig. Its weight dropped the prize almost into Judy's fingers. She touched it. "I found him!" She touched it and sank with a final effort into a heap upon the ground. The bird fluttered an instant and was gone into the darkness. The twig, released, flew back, but at the end of it, swinging out of reach, still hung the lovely blossom in midair, unpicked. There was confusion about the four of them. The light faded very quickly, and darkness blotted out the world. The rose was no longer visible. The bush, the wall, the rubbish heap, all were shrouded. The singing bird had gone. The tramp beside his little fire was hidden. They could hardly see one another's faces, even. Voices rose on every side. "She missed it." "It was too lovely to be picked." "It's still there growing. I can smell it." Yet above them all was heard Judy's voice that rose out of the darkness, like a bird that sings at midnight. "I touched it. My airy signs came true. I know the hiding place. I found him." The voice had something in it of the tramp's careless, windy singing as well. "Look, he's touched me. Look!" For in that instant when the rose swung out of reach again, in that instant when she touched it, and before the fading light hid everything, all saw the petal floating down to earth. It settled slowly, with a zigzag butterfly course, fluttering close in front of their enchanted eyes. And it was this petal, perhaps, that brought the darkness, for as it sank it grew vast and spread until it covered the entire sky. Like a fairy silken sheet of softest colored velvet, it lay on everything, as though the heavens lowered and folded over them. They felt it press softly on their faces. A curtain, it seemed. Someone had let the curtain down. Beneath it, then, the confusion became extraordinary. There was tumult of various kinds. Everyone cried at once, "I found him, now I know!" At the touch of the petal, groans so vast upon their eyelids, each knew his sign had led him to the supreme discovery. This flower was born of the travail of the universe, child of the elements, or at least blessed by them. This petal of a small wild rose made all things clear, for upon its velvet skin still lay the morning dew. Air kissed it, its root and origin was earth, the fire of the sun blazed in its perfect colouring. Yet in the tumult and confusion, such curious behaviour followed. For come-back Stumper, crying that he saw a purple beetle pass across the world, proceeded to curl up as though he had crawled into a spiral snail shell, meant to go to sleep in it. Tim shouted in the darkness that he was riding a huge badger down a hole that led to the centre of the earth, and Uncle Felix begged everyone to come and look what he saw, darkness or no darkness, the splash of misty blue upon the body of a dragonfly. They might have been almost telling their dreams at breakfast time, but while the clamour of their excited voices stirred the world beneath the marvellous covering, there rose that other sound, increasing until it overpowered every word they uttered. In the world outside there was a clicking, grating, hard and metallic sound, as though machinery was starting somewhere. And Judy, managing somehow or another to lift a corner and peer out, saw that the dawn was breaking in the eastern sky, and that a new day was just beginning. The sun was rising. She went back again to tell the others, but she could not find them. She did not try very hard, she just didn't look for them. She just closed her eyes. The swallows were chattering in the eaves, a robin sang a few marvellous bars, then ceased, and an up and under bird sent forth its wild, high bugle call, then dived out of sight below the surface of the pond. Judy did likewise, dived down and under, drawing the soft covering on against her cheek, and although her eyes were already closed, she closed them somehow a second time. "Everything's all right," she had a butterfly sort of thought. "There's no hurry, it's not time yet." And the petal covered her again from head to foot. She had noticed a little further off a globular round object lying motionless beneath another corner of the covering. It gave her a feeling of comfort and security. She slid away to find the others. It seemed she floated, rather. "Everything's free and careless, and so am I. For we shall never forget," she remembered sweetly, and was gone, fluttering after the up and under bird, into some hidden world that she had discovered. The old mill house lay dreaming in the dawn. Transparent shades of pink and gold stole slowly up the eastern sky. A stream of amber diffused itself below the paling stars. Rising from a furnace below the horizon, it reached across and touched the zenith, painting mid-heaven with a mystery none could understand, then sank downwards and dipped the crests of the trees, the lawn, the moss-grown tiles upon the roof, in that sea of everlasting wonder which is light. Dawn caught the old sleeping world once more in its breathless beauty. The earth turned over in her sleep, gasped with delight, and woke. There was a murmur and a movement everywhere. The spacious, stately life that breathes o'er ancient trees came forth from the wood without a centre, from the lines that emanated that gracious, almost tender force that they harvest in spring. There was a little shiver of joy among the rose trees. The daisies blinked and stared, and the earth broke into singing. Then in this chorus came a pause. The thousand voices hushed a moment. The robin ceased its passionate solo in the shrubbery. All listened to another and far sweeter song that stirred with the morning wind among the rose trees. It was very soft and tender. It died away and returned with a faint, mysterious murmur. It rose and fell so gently that it may have been only the rustling of 1,000 leaves that guarded the opening blossom, and yet it ran with power across the entire waking earth. My secret's in the wind and open sky. There is no longer any time to lose. The world is young with laughter. We can fly among the imprisoned hours as we choose. The rushing minutes pause. An unused day breaks into dawn and cheats the tired sun. The birds are singing. Hark! Come out and play. There is no hurry. Life has just begun. And as it died away, the sun itself came up and shouted it aloud, as with a million golden trumpets. Okay, before we dive into the last two chapters of this book, uh, it is time for intermission. I'm only just barely late for that. Nice. So, I'm going to put up the BRB, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes. My brain fell out. We'll be back in about 15 minutes. Now would be a grand old time to grab yourself some water, stand up, stretch your legs, if you've been sitting with me, that is. Uh, Take any necessary medications. If you tend to forget those, here's your reminder for that. Definitely give some love to your pets, and we'll be back in 15 minutes-ish. I won't be too long. See you all in a few. Did I come back on time for once? Maybe. That felt pretty close to 15 minutes. Give me just a second to make sure nothing's on fire. Ooh. Sorry. Oh. Uh, my partner sent me something very funny on Tumblr. By the way, did you all know I have a Tumblr? There is technically a glaciernestor.tumblr.com, I think. I haven't posted on it in approximately 1,000 years. I used to have an if this then that set up. Let me make sure that's real. Yeah, there is glaciernestor.tumblr.com. Yeah, I had an if this then that set up, so it would just spit out a post every time the YouTube posted a thing. I have no idea if it's still alive. I mean, it has posted the most recent video that's been officially posted to the channel, which is Pikmin 3, which I need to get back to Pikmin 3. I gotta iron the kinks out of my graphics card. It's still yelling about how it likes feet. Um, but once I iron those wrinkles out, I should be able to come back to playing PC games. Because there's a bunch of PC games that I want to play again. Like, not to stray too far off topic, but like, Heavy Bullets was super, super fun, and the video did really well, which is kind of great. But like, also, I just had a ton of fun playing Heavy Bullets, so it was a good time. And it would be a good alternative option for Monday nights when I'm not feeling up to storytelling, because you only have so much storytelling juice in your brain, and I already run a D&D campaign and a Monsters campaign, so keeping those spinning along with Monday Night Tabletop is kind of a lot sometimes, so I would love to, kind of breathe in creatively rather than breathe out creatively uh, on occasion. And, videos game are great for that. But anyway, I've digressed a good ways off topic. If you care about Tumblr, definitely go give that a look. If anything, it's just a more reliable way to see that I have been posting YouTube videos, because YouTube has a very bad habit of not actually showing you things when people post stuff. I'm a little bitter about it, to be honest. And I'm not even 99% of the time, I'm not even the one that it's affecting anymore. Anyway, I have digressed. Let's get back to the book. Oh no, my snowfall's broken. See, this is why we use studio mode, so the snowfall doesn't break. Any minute now, the snowfall will return to existing. I know what's happening. It's regenerating the snow. Is it regenerating the snow? Oh yeah, it definitely had to sit there and think for a minute to regenerate the snow. It does that every now and again. I actually designed it with that intent in mind, so that it would regenerate the snow. Because I didn't want the snow to be static every time. If the snow was going to be static every time, why would I write it programmatically? I'd just commission an asset from somebody, you know? Uh, but I digress. Sometimes I get bit by the do-it-yourself goblin, and I make it wildly overcomplicated. Like, I have been sketching a website for the Paper Cuts podcast for literally since I started season 2. Since we first started The Last Man, I have been sketching an idea for a website out, and I'm wildly overcomplicating it. It does not need to be anywhere near as difficult as I'm making it. I could I could make it the easy way, and it would be just fine, and it would look great. But no, I need it to look different. I need it to be cool. And what's funny is, uh, one of the things I have planned for it if I ever get my idea off the ground is just making it easier to navigate with a screen reader than visually, which, like, I know will affect the amount of people that click on things on the website, but I think that would be a very, like, on brand goof to pull for an audiobook podcast. Anyway, before I spiral off topic for approximately 1,000 years and just talk about behind the curtain stuff that's not done yet, which I thought I placed a moratorium on that, gosh darn it. Let's dive into chapter 10, 15, 18. Chapter 18, Time Goes On Again. Hardly had Judy closed her eyes for the second time, however, than had the globular object she noticed in the corner stirred. It turned, but turned all over, as though it were a ball. It made a sideways movement, too, a movement best described as budging. And accompanying the movements was a comfortable, contented, satisfied sound that some people call deep breathing and others call a sigh. The globular outline then grew slightly longer. One portion of it left the central mass, but it left slowly. The lower part prolonged itself. Slight cracks were audible like sharp reports, muffled but quite distant. Next, the other end of the ball extended itself, twisted in a leisurely fashion sideways, rose above the general surface, and plainly showed itself. It, too, was round. It emerged. Upon its surface shone two small pools of blue. It was a face. Even in the gray, uncertain light, this was beyond dispute. It was Maria's face. Maria awoke. Magnus, buddy, Magnus, guy, you were doing so well. You were sleeping in the box. You were having a great time. Yeah, no digging. It's not required. How about we come sit with Papa? Yeah, how does that sound? I was wondering where Maria had gotten off to, by the way. Yeah. How about we calm down? No need to dig at the food bowl. Also, if any of you have any ideas as to how to stop Magnus digging at the food bowl, like, I am led to understand that he digs at the food bowl because he's anxious about some kind of predatory action stealing his food. And so he just sits there and paws at it. But it is, while it does not break anything anymore, I've made it so he's not outright, like, harming or breaking anything. It is annoying the ever-living heck out of me. So if there is a way to, like, safely stop him from doing all that, I would really appreciate it. You know, because it is associated with the food, I'm very hesitant to, spray water at him or shame him like I have been. Just because I don't want him to have a negative association with the food bowl, So if any of you know, in greater depth other than he's anxious about predators, why he's doing that, or any ideas to get him to stop doing that, I would really appreciate it. Currently, if we put something over the food, he stops digging because he's like, oh, it's out of the way. But this one, he don't have enough brain cells to move the thing over top of the food. And so he goes, food's empty. Where food, Papa? And then he panics and eats way too fast. Sir, if you're gonna do that, can you at least do it quietly so it doesn't show up on the podcast? He's like, no. No, I cannot. I'm a little chaos man. Yeah, I know you're a little chaos man. How would you come up here? How do you feel about that? Upon surface. Oh yeah, we had just discovered that the orb was Maria. Maria awoke. She looked about her calmly. Her mind, ever unclouded because it thought of one thing only, took in the situation at a glance. It was dawn. She was in bed and sleepy. It was not time to get up. Dawn, sleep in bed, time itself belonged to her. There certainly was no hurry. Pools of blue then disappeared together. The smaller ball sank down into the pillow to join the larger one. The lower portion that had stretched itself in drew once again into itself, and a peaceful sigh informed the universe that Maria intended to resume her interrupted slumbers. She became once more a mere globular outline, self-contained, at rest. But in accepting life as it really was by lying down again, the lesser ball had imperceptibly occupied a new position. Maria's head had shifted. her ear now pressed against another portion of the pillow, and this pressure, communicating itself to an object that lay beneath the pillow, touched a small brass handle, jerked it forward, released a bit of quivering wire connected with a set of wheels, and set in motion the entire insides of this hidden object. There was a sound of grating. This hard, metallic sound rose through the feathers, a clicking, thudding noise that reached her brain. It was, she knew instantly, the stopped alarm clock. It had been overwound. The weight of her head had started it again. Maria, as usual, by doing nothing in particular, had accomplished much. By yielding herself to her surroundings, she united her insignificant personal forces with the gigantic purposes of life. She swung contentedly in rhythm with the universe. Maria had set the clock going again. There was excitement in her then, but certainly no hurry. Disturbing herself as little as possible, she pushed one hand beneath the pillow, drew out the ticking clock, looked at it quietly, remembered sleepily that it had stopped at dawn, Uncle Felix had said so, and put it on the chair beside her bed, promptly retiring again into her eternal center. Tim's clock, she realized, but I got it. There was no expression on her face whatever. Another child might have taken the trouble, felt interested at any rate, to try and see what time it was, but Maria, aware that the dim light would make this a difficult and tedious operation, did nothing of the sort. It could make no difference anyhow to anyone anywhere. She was content to know that it was some time or other that the clock was going again. Her plan of life was interfere with nothing. She did not know, therefore, that the hands pointed with accuracy to 4 a.m., because she merely did not care to know. But, not caring to know, placed her a loftier platform of intelligence than the rest of the world, certainly above that of her sister Judy, who was snoring softly among the shadows just across the room. Maria didn't know that she didn't know. No one could rebuke her with "you might have known," much less "you didn't know," because she didn't know she didn't know. It was the biggest kind of knowledge in the world, and Maria had it. But before she actually regained her absolute center, and long before she lost sight of herself within its depths, dim thoughts came floating through her mind, like pictures that moonlight paints upon high summer clouds. She saw these pictures. That is, she looked at them and recognized their existence, but she asked no questions. They reached her through the ticking of the busy clock beside the bed. The ticking brought them, but it brought them back. Maria remembered things, and chief among them were the following: that Uncle Felix had promised everybody an extra day, that he had stopped all the clocks to let it come, that this extra day was to be her own particular adventure, that last night was Saturday, and that this was therefore Sunday morning, very early. And the instant she remembered these things, they were real, for her. She accepted them, one and all, even the contradictions in them. If this actually was an extra day, it couldn't be Sunday, and vice versa. Yet she knew it was. Both were. The confusion was a confusion of words only. There were too many words about. Why not? Expressed her attitude. The clock might tick itself to death for all she cared. The extra day was her adventure, and she claimed it. But she didn't bother about it. Above all, she asked no question. Nothing really meant everything in particular, because everything meant anything. To ask questions, even of herself, involved hearing a lot of answers and listening to them. But answers were explanations and... But answers were explanations, and explanations muddled and obscured. Explanations were a new set of questions merely. People who didn't know asked questions, and people who didn't understand gave explanations. Aunt Emily explained because she didn't understand. Also because she didn't understand, she didn't know. To ask a question was the same thing as to explain it. Everything was one thing. She, Maria, both knew and understood. She didn't say all this. She didn't think it even. She just felt it all. It was her feeling. Believing in her particular adventure of an extra day, she had already experienced it. She had shared it with the others too. It was her extra day, so she could do with it what she pleased. They can have it, she gave the clock to understand. I'm going to sleep again. All life was an extra day to her. She went to sleep. Sleep, rather, came to her. Happy dreams amused and comforted her, and while she dreamed, the dawn slid higher up the sky, ushering in Sunday morning. Chapter 19. As usual. Consciousness was the first. Unconsciousness. The biggest changes are unconscious before they are conscious. They've been long preparing. They fall with a clap, and people call them sudden and exclaim, "How strange!" But it is only discovery and recognition that are sudden. It has all happened already, long ago, happened before. The faint sense of familiarity betrays it. It is there the strangeness lies. And it was this delicate fragrance of an uncommunicable strangeness that floated in the air when Uncle Felix and the children came down to breakfast that Sunday, and heard the sound of bells and the wind across the fields. They came down punctually for a wonder, too. Maria, last but not actually late, brought the alarm clock with her. "It's going," she stated quietly, and handed it to her brother. Tim took it without a word, looked at it, shook it, listened to its ticking against his ear, and then set it on the mantelpiece where it belonged. He seemed pleased to have it in his possession again, yet something puzzled him. An expression of wonder flitted across his face. The eyes turned upwards. He frowned. There was an effort in him to remember something. He turned to Maria, who was already deep in porridge. "Did you wind it up? I thought it stopped last night." "It's going," she said, thinking of her porridge chiefly. "It wasn't, though," insisted Tim. He reflected a moment, evidently perplexed. "I wound it and forgot, or else it wound itself." He went to his place and began his breakfast. "Wound itself," mentioned Maria, then the subject dropped. It was Sunday morning, and everybody was dressed in Sunday things. The excitement of the evening before, the promise of an extra day, that detailed preparation, all of it had disappeared. Being of yesterday, it was no longer vital. Certainly there was no necessity to consult it. They looked forward rather than backward. The mystery of life ever lay just in front of them. What lay behind was already done with. They had lived it out. It was in their possession, therefore, part of themselves. No one of the four devouring porridge round that breakfast table had forgotten about the promise, any more than they'd forgotten giving up their timepieces, the conversation, and all the rest of it. It was not forgetfulness, it was not loss of interest either that led no one to refer to it, least of all to clamor for the fulfillment. There was quite another motive that kept them silent, and that even when Uncle Felix handed back the watches, prevented them saying anything more than "Thank you, Uncle," than hanging them on to belt and waistcoat. Expectation, an eternal expectation, was established in them. But there was also this sense of elusive strangeness in their hearts, the certainty that an enormous interval had passed, almost the conviction that an extra day had been. Somewhere, somehow, they had experienced its fulfillment. It was now inside them. A strange familiarity hung about this Sunday morning. Yet there were still a million things to do, and endless time in which to do them. Expectation was stronger than ever before, but the sense of interval brought a happy feeling of completion, too. There was no hurry. They felt something of what Maria felt, living at the center of a circle that turned unceasingly but never finished. It was Maria's particular adventure, and Maria had shared it with them. Wonder and expectation made them feel more than usually alive. They talked normally while eating and drinking. If things were said that skirted a mystery, no one tried to find its name or label it. It was just hiding. Let it hide. To find it was to lose the mystery. Life without mystery was unthinkable. "That's bells," said Tim. "It's church this morning." But he didn't sigh. There was no sinking of the heart, it seemed. He spoke as if it was an adventure he looked forward to. "I've decided what I'm going to be," he went on. "An engineer, but a mining engineer. Finding things in the earth, valuable things, like gold and coal." Why he said it was not clear exactly. It had no apparent connection with church bells. He just thought of life as a whole, perhaps, and what he meant to do with it. He looked forward across the years to come, and he distinctly knew himself alive. "I shall put 6 pence in, I think. It's a lot. "And I shall wear my blue hat with the pheasant's feather," said Judy presently. "Pheasant's feather," repeated Tim in a single word, amused as usual by the curious sounds. "And a wild rose here," she added, pointing to the place on her dress, but nobody felt interested enough to look. Her remark about the collection was more vital than the other. Collections in church were made, they believed, to feed the clergyman, and Sunday was the clergyman's day. "I've got sixpence," Tim hastened to remind everybody. "Got a threepenny bit as well." "It's sixpence today, I think," Judy decided almost tenderly. Behind her thought was a caring, generous impulse. The motherly instinct sent her mind to the collection for the clergyman's comfort. But romance stirred too. She wanted to look her best. Her two main tendencies seemed very much alive this Sunday morning. The hat and the sixpence, both were real. Maria, as usual, had little or nothing to say. She spoke once, however. "I dreamed," she informed the company. She did not look up, keeping her head bent over the bread and marmalade upon her plate. Her blue eyes rolled round the table once, then stopped again. No one asked for details of her dream. She had no desire to supply them. She announced her position comfortably, as it were, set herself right with life, and quietly went on with the business of the moment, which was bread and marmalade. Uncle Felix looked up, however, as she said it. "That reminds me, I dreamed too. I dreamed that you dreamed." "Yes," Maria repeated briefly, moving her eyes in his direction, but not her head. No other remarks were made. The statement was too muddled to stimulate interest particularly. When breakfast was over, they went to the open window and threw crumbs to a robin that was obviously expecting to be fed. They all leaned out with their heads in the sunlight, watching it. It hopped from a twig onto the ground, its body already tight to bursting. It looked like a toy balloon, as though it was a dress of red elastic, stretched to such a point that the merest pinprick must explode it with a sharp report, and it hopped as though springs were in its feet. The earth, like a taut sheet, made it bounce. Tim aimed missiles of bread rolled into pellets at its head, but never hit it. "It's a lovely morning," remarked Uncle Felix, looking across the garden to the yellow fields beyond. "A perfect day. We'll walk to church." He brushed the breakfast crumbs from the waistcoat of his neat blue suit, lit his pipe, sniffed the air contentedly, and had an air of generally a sailor on shore leave. Judy sprang up. "There's buttonholes to get," she mentioned, and flew out of the room like a flash of sunlight or a bird. Tim raced after her. "Wallflower for me," he cried, while Judy's answer floated back from halfway down the passage. "I'll have a wild rosebud, and it'll match my hat." Uncle Felix and Maria were left alone, gazing out of the window side by side upon the lovely morning. She was just high enough to see above the edge, and her two hands lay sprawled, fingers extended, upon the shining sill. "Yes," she mentioned quietly, as to herself, "and I'll have a forget-me-not." Her eyes rolled up sideways, meeting those of her uncle, as he turned and noticed her. For quite suddenly he noticed her, became aware that she was there, discovered her. He stared a moment, as though reflecting. That yes had a strange, familiar sound about it, surely. "Maria, I believe you will. Everything comes to you of its own accord somehow." She nodded. "There's another thing. You've got a secret, haven't you?" It occurred to him that Maria was rather wonderful. "I expect so," she answered after a moment's pause. She looked wiser than an owl, he thought. "What is it? What's your secret? Can't you tell me?" For it came over him that Maria, for all her inactivity, was really more truly alive than both the other children put together. Their tireless, incessant energy was nothing compared to some deep well of life Maria's outer calm concealed. He continued to stare at her, reflecting while he did so. Through her globular exterior, standing here beside him, rose this quiet tide whose profound and inexhaustible source was nothing less than the entire universe. Finding himself thus alone with her, he knew his imagination singularly stirred. The full stream of this imagination, usually turned into sea and history stories, now poured into Maria. It was the way that she delivered herself of the monosyllable yes, the first enflamement of him. The child, obviously, was quite innocent that her uncle's imagination clothed her in such wonder. She was entirely unself-conscious, and remained so, but as she kept silent as well, there was nothing to interrupt the natural process of his thought. "You're a circle, a mystery, a globe of wonder," his mind addressed her, gazing downwards, half in play and half in earnest. "You're always going through it. Though you seem so still, you're turning furiously like a little planet." For this deeply struck him, flashing like the symbol into his imagination, that Maria lived so close to the universe that her life and movements were akin to those of the heavenly bodies. He saw her as an epitome of the earth, fat, peaceful, little, calm, round, rotund Maria, a miniature earth. She had no call to hurry, nor rush after things. Like the earth, she contained all things within herself. It made him smile. He smiled as he looked down into her face. She smiled as she rolled her blue eyes upwards into his. Yet her calm was not the calm of sloth. In that mysterious center where she lived, he felt her as tremendously alive. For the earth, apparently so calm and steady, knows no pause. She moves around her axis without stopping. She rushes with immense rapidity round the sun. Simultaneously with these two movements, she combines a third. The sun, carrying her and all his other planets with him, hurries at a prodigious rate through interstellar space, adventuring new regions never seen before. Calm outwardly, and without apparent motion, the earth, at this very moment, as he leaned across the window-sill, was making these three gigantic, endless movements. Magnus, I was really hitting a stride there, buddy. Can we relax on the digging? This peaceful summer morning, like any other peaceful summer morning, she was actually spinning, rushing, rising. And in Maria it came to him. In Maria, outwardly so calm, something also spun, rushed, and rose. This amazing life that brimmed her full to bursting, even as it brimmed the robin and the earth, overflowed and dripped out of her very eyes in shining blue. There was no need for her to dash about. She, like the earth, was carried. All this flashed upon him while the alarm clock ticked off a second merely, for imagination telescopes time, of course, and knows all things at once. "What is your secret, Maria?" he asked again. "I believe it's about that extra day we meant to steal. Is that it?" Her eyes gazed straight before her, across the lawn where Tim and Judy were now visible, searching busily for buttonholes. "It was to be your particular adventure, wasn't it?" "Yes," she told him at length, without changing her expression of serene contentment. His imagination warned him he was getting at her gradually. He possibly read into her 1,000 things that were not there. Certainly, Maria was not aware of them. But though Uncle Felix knew this perfectly well, he persisted, hoping for a sudden disclosure that would justify his search, even expecting it, perhaps. "And what sort of day would it be, then, this extra day of yours? It would never end, of course, for one thing, would it? There'd be no time." She nodded quietly, by way of effortless agreement and consent. "So that, in a sense, you'd have it always," he said, aware of distinct encouragement. He felt obliged to help her. This was her peculiar power, that everything was done for her while she seemed to do it all herself. "You'd live it over and over again, forever and ever. That's your secret, I expect, isn't it?" "I expect so," the child answered quietly. "I've always got it." She moved in a little closer to his side as she said it. The disclosure he expected seemed so near now that excitement grew in him. Across the lawn he saw the hurrying figures of Tim and Judy racing back with their buttonholes. There was no time to lose. He put his arm about her, tilting her face upwards with one hand to see it plainly. The blue dyes came up with it. "Then what kind of a day would you choose, Maria? Tell me." In a whisper. And then the disclosure came, but it was not whispered. Uncle Felix heard the secret in a very clear, decided voice and in a single word, "Birthday." At the same moment the others poured into the room. They came like a cataract. It seemed that a dozen children rushed upon them in a torrent. The air was full of voices and flowers suddenly. The smell of the open world came in with them. Buttonholes were fastened onto everybody, accompanied by a breathless chorus of where and how they'd been found, who got the best, who got it first, and all the rest. From the end of the world they came, apparently, but while Tim had climbed the wall for his, Judy picked hers because a bird had lowered the branch onto her very hand. For Uncle Felix she brought a spray of lilac. Tim brought a bit of mignonette. Eventually he had to wear them both. "And here's a forget-me-not, Maria," cried Judy, stooping down to poke it into her sister's blue and white striped dress. "That suits you best, I thought." "Thank you," said Maria, moving her eyes the smallest possible fraction of an inch. And they scampered out of the room again, Maria ambling slowly in the rear to prepare for church. There were prayer books and things to find, 3 penny bits and 6pences for the collection. There was simply heaps to do, as they expressed it, and not a moment to lose either. Uncle Felix listened to the sound of voices and footsteps as they flew down the passage, dying rapidly away into the distance, and finally ceasing altogether. He puffed his pipe a little longer before going to his room upon a similar errand. He watched the smoke curl up and melt into the outer air. He felt the pleasant sunshine warm upon his face. He smelt the perfume rising from his enormous buttonhole. But of these things he did not think. He thought of what Maria had said. The way she uttered that single word remained with him. Birthday. He had half divined her secret. For her birthday was the opening of life. It was the beginning. Maria had got it always. All days for her were birthdays, extra days. And while they walked along down the lane to church, he was still thinking about it. The conversation proved that he was absent-minded, rather. Yet not that his mind was absent so much as intent upon other things. The children found him heavy. He seemed ponderous to them. And pondering he certainly was, pondering the meaning of existence. The children, he realized, were such brilliant comments upon existence, their unconscious way of living. All they said and thought and did, but especially all they believed, offered such bright interpretations, such simple solutions of a million things. They lived so really, and were so really alive. They were never explained, they just accepted. And the explanations given, they just placed at their true value, still asking, "Yes, but what's the meaning of all that?" So close to reality they lived, before reason cloaked and confused it with a million complex explanations. That "yes" and "birthday" of Maria's were illuminating examples. Of this he was vaguely pondering as they walked along down the sunny lanes to church, and his conversation proved it. For conversation with children meant answering endless questions merely, and the questions were prompted by anything and everything they saw. Reality poked them. They gave expression to it by a question. Nothing real was trivial. The most careless detail was important, all being but a single question, an affirmation. We're alive, so everything else is too. His conversation proved that he'd almost reached that state of timeless reality in which they lived. He felt it this morning very vividly. It seemed familiar somehow, like his own childhood recovered almost. He answered them accordingly. It didn't matter what was said, because all the words in the world said one thing only. Whether the words, therefore, made sense or not was of no importance. "You ever seen a rabbit come out of its hole? They do that for safety," he added, and if there was confusion in his language, there was none in his thought. "No one can tell what its hole is, you see, because each rabbit—" He broke off and glanced expectantly at his uncle. At junctions like this, his uncle usually cleared things up with an easy word or two. He wouldn't fail now. "Come out? No. No one ever sees a rabbit come out. But I've seen them go in, and that's the same thing in the end. They go down the wrong hole on purpose. They ain't no right enough. Rabbits are rabbits." "Of course," exclaimed Judy. "Everything is itself and knows its own sign, or business, I mean." "Yes," Maria repeated. And before anything further could be mentioned, if there was anything to mention, they arrived at the porch of the church, passed under it without speaking, walked up the aisle and took their places in the family pew, Maria occupying the comfortable corner against the inner wall. All right, last chapter, folks. Not gonna lie, I forgot the chapter count for a second. I was like, wow, this chapter is just full of like lines that would end other novels. I think this is the last chapter. Let me double check. Oh, yeah. Yep. Last chapter. Chapter 20. But differently. Church was very, that is, they enjoyed the service very much, without knowing precisely why they liked it. They joined in the hymns with more energy than usual, because they felt singing and knew the tunes as well. Colonel Stumper, Colonel Stumper handed round one of the bags at the end of a long pole, and though the clergyman didn't look at us at all as if he required feeding, the 3 penny bits dropped in without the least regret on the part of the contributors. Tim's coin, however, having been squeezed for several minutes before the bag came round, stuck to his moist finger, and Stumper, thinking he had nothing to put in, drove the long handle past him toward Maria. That same instant the coin came unstuck and dropped with a rattle into the aisle. Comeback Stumper stopped to recover it, whereupon to Judy, Tim, and Uncle Felix, watching him, came a sudden feeling of familiarity, as though all this had happened before. The bent figure, groping after the hidden coin, seemed irresistibly familiar. It was very odd, they thought. Very odd indeed. Where, when had they seen him groping before like that? Almost on all fours. But no one, of course, could remark upon it, and it was only Tim and Judy who exchanged a brief, significant glance. Maria, being asleep, did not witness it, nor did she contribute to the feeding of the clergyman either. There followed a short sermon, of which they heard only the beginning, the end, and certain patches in the middle when the preacher raised his voice abruptly, but the text, they all agreed, was "Seek, and ye shall find." During the delivery of the portions that escaped them, Tim scratched his head and thought about rabbits, while Judy's mind hesitated between various costumes in the pews in front of her, unable to decide which she would wear when she reached the age of its respective owner. And so, in due course, feeling somehow that something very real had been accomplished, they streamed out with the rest of the congregation into the blazing summer sunshine. Expectant, inquisitive, and hungry, they stood between the yew tree and the porch, yawning and fidgeting until Uncle Felix gave the signal to start. The sunlight made them blink. There was something of pleasurable excitement in knowing themselves part of a congregation, for a congregation was distantly connected with metropolis and government, and an important kind of thing at any time. They stood and watched it. It scattered slowly, loath to separate and go. There was no hurry, certainly. People talked in lowered voices, as if conversation after service was against the rules, and the church and graves might overhear. They smiled, but not too gaily. They seemed subdued, yet really they wanted to sing and dance. Once safely out of hearing and sight, they would run and jump and stand on their heads. The children, that is, attributed their own feelings to them. Several, all members of the congregation, approached and asked unreal questions, to which Judy, as the eldest, gave unreal answers. "Your parents will be back soon again?" "Yes, father comes tomorrow, mother too." "I hope they've enjoyed their little change." "I think so, thank you." Gradually, the congregation melted away. Yeah, before I continue the sentence, Kariki points out government. Yeah, this book has a delightful habit, of just occasionally misspelling words phonetically. I find it very satisfying to read. I don't know that I always apply the intended inflection. I just kind of read it as the word. But I have found it very, I found it very entertaining to read because of that. Uh, what's another one they did? There's government. Like they ran like not at all something into one word, or Historical novel instead of historical novel. It's historical novel. Let me type that in chat. Historical novel. Or like stuff like that. It this book very much delights in its. It is willing to cast off correct spelling every now and again just to kind of get its point across phonetically. Like earlier when we were interacting with Mrs. Hopper, the cook, and she was becoming more Irish, in the middle of the extra day. Uh, there was a change in the way that her dialogue was written to try and imply a bit of that Irish accent. I thought it was very neat. Anyway, now that I've digressed. Uh, a language that devolved into Mondegreens. Mondegreens, I feel like I've heard that word before. Does that mean what I think it does? Mondegreens. Mondegreens, a misunderstood or misinterpreted word or phrase resulting from mishearing the lyrics of a song. Yeah, essentially, these were spoken Mondegreens from like the perspective of the young children's ears. You know that these kids didn't quite 100% get what was being said, and so they just kind of went, "Oh yeah, that's what that sounds like. That's what that is." I don't know. This Mondegreens, I can't believe I didn't remember that word because that's such a great word. Oh man, I have a story about a really good Mondegreen in a song. If I remember it once we're done reading this, remind me. And I might try to remember it. Anyway, gradually the congregation melted away. Broughams and Victorias drove off sedately down the road, the horses making as little sound as possible with their hoofs. The choir boys emerged from a side door and vanished into a field. A series of old ladies and invalids felt their way down the gravel path with sticks. The neighbors, looking clean and dressed up, went off in various directions. Gravely voices hushed, manners circumspect. Tim, feeling as usual awfully empty after church, was sure that they ran as fast as ever they could, the moment they were out of sight. A congregation was a wonderful thing altogether. It was a puzzle how the little church could hold so many people. They watched the whole familiar business with suppressed excitement, forgetting they were hungry and impatient. It was both real and unreal. Something better beckoned beyond all the time, but there was no hurry. It was a deep childhood mystery. Wonder filled them to the brim. "Come on, children, we'll be off now," sounded their uncle's voice, and at the same moment, comeback Stumper had joined them. He had been counting over the money with a clergyman, of course, all this time. He was very slow. They hoped their contributions had been noticed. "You'll come back with us?" suggested Uncle Felix, and Stumper, growling his acceptance, "Yes," walked home to lunch with them in the old mill house. In his short black coat, trousers of shepherd's plaid, a knotted white tie bearing a neat horseshoe pin, he looked smart, yet soldierly. Tim apologized for his moist finger in the threepenny bit. "I thought it had got down a hole," he said, "but you found it wonderfully." "It simply flew," cried Judy. "Clever old thing," she added with admiration. "I found harder things than that. Hid itself well, though. Hanging in the open like a lost collar stud. Thought I'd never look there." They glanced at one another with a curious, half-expectant air, and Tim suddenly took the soldier's hand, but no one said anything more about it. Sin was forgiven and forgotten. Uncle Felix put in a vague remark concerning Indian life, and Stumper mentioned proudly that a new edition of his scouting book was coming out and that he'd just finished revising the last sheets. "Well, yesterday I spent working on it," he informed him with a satisfied air. Whereupon Tim said, "Fancy that!" and Judy exclaimed, "Did you really?" They seemed to have an idea that he was doing something else all yesterday, but no one knew exactly what it was. Then Judy planted herself in the road before him, made him stop, and picked something off his shoulder. "A tiny caterpillar! Another minute and you'd have had it down your neck. Would have come back, though." "Would have come back, though?" "It mightn't have, But look, it's awfully beautiful." They examined it for a moment, all 5 of them. Then Judy set it down carefully in the ditch and watched it march away towards the safer hedge. It was a pleasant walk home. Goodness gracious. It was a pleasant walk home. All together they took the short cut across the fields. The world was covered with flowers, birds were singing, the air was fresh and sweet, and the delicious sunlight was not uncomfortably hot. Tim ran everywhere, exploring eagerly like a dog, and also like a dog, doubling the journey's length. He whistled to himself. From time to time he came back to report results of his discoveries. He was full of energy. Judy behaved in a similar manner, dancing in circles to make her hair and dress fly out. She sang bits of the hymn tunes that she liked, taking the tune but fitting words of her own over it. Maria was carried over 2 fields and a half. The downhill parts she walked, however. She kept everybody waiting. They could not leave her. "Kept you waiting, huh?" She contrived to make herself the center of the party. Stumper and Uncle Felix brought up the rear, talking together about things, and whirling their sticks in the air as though it helped them forward somehow. On the slippery plank bridge across the mill stream, all paused a moment to watch the dragonflies that set the air on fire with their colored tails. "The things that nobody can understand." "Nobody else. We do," Tim corrected her. They leaned over the rail and saw their own reflections in the running water. "My comeback hasn't got a buttonhole," exclaimed Judy, and flew off to find one for him, Tim fast upon her heels like a collie after a dipping swallow. They raced down the banks where the golden kingcups grew in spendthrift patches and disappeared among the colonies of reeds. Between some hanging willow branches further down they were visible a moment, like dryad figures peering and flitting through the cataract of waving green. They searched as though their lives depended on success. It was absurd that Stumper had no buttonhole. Maria, seated comfortably on the lower rail, watched their efforts and listened to the bursts of laughing voices that came upstream. Then, with a leisurely movement, took her flower from her own buttonhole and handed it to Stumper. The eyes rolled upwards with the flower solemnly, and Comeback saw the action reflected in the stream below. "Thank you, my dear," he said, fastening the forget-me-not into his Sunday coat. "But I ought not to take it all. It's yours." The voice had a quiet, almost distant sound in it. "Ours," Maria murmured to herself, addressing the faces in the water. She took the fragment Stumper handed back to her, and all 3, forgetting it was time for lunch, forgetting they were hungry, forgetting that there was still half a mile of lane between them and the house, gazed down at their reflections in the stream, as though fascinated. Uncle Felix certainly felt the watery enchantment in his soul. The reflections trembled and quivered, yet did not pass away. The stream flowed hurrying by them, yet still was always there. It gave him a strange, familiar feeling, something he knew but had forgotten. Everything in life was passing, yet nothing went. There was no hurry. The rippling music, as the water washed the banks and made the grasses swish, was audible, and there was a deeper sound of swirling round the wooden posts that held the bridge secure. Bubbles rose and burst in spray. A lark, hanging like a cross in the blue sky overhead, dropped suddenly as though it was a stone, but in the reflection it rushed up into their faces. It seemed to rise at them from the pebbly bed of the stream. Both movements seemed one and the same. Both were true. The direction depended on the point of view. It startled them and broke the water spell. The singing stopped abruptly, too. At the same moment, Judy and Tim arrived, their arms full of flowers, hemlock, ferns, and bulrushes. They were breathless and exhausted. Both talked at once. They'd quite forgotten, apparently, what they had gone to find. Judy had seen a kingfisher. Tim had discovered tracks of an otter. In the excitement, they forgot about the buttonhole. But somehow the bird, the animal, and the flowers were the same thing, really. One big, simple thing. Only the point of view was different. "We've looked simply everywhere. Just look what we found." To Uncle Felix it seemed they said one and the same thing merely, using one word and many syllables. "Beautiful," agreed Stumper, as they emptied their arms at his feet in wild profusion. "Enough for everybody, too." Stumper also said the thing they had just said. Uncle Felix watched him move forward where Maria was already using the heaped-up greenery as a cushion for her back, and picked something off the stem of a giant bulrush. "That's what I like best," he said. "Look at the color, will you? Blue, green, and yellow. You can hear the ganges in it if you listen close enough." He held a small, colored snail shell between his sinewy fingers and placed it against his ear, while the others, caught by a strange, enveloping sense of wonder, stared and listened, swept for a moment into another world. "How marvelous!" whispered someone. "Extraordinary!" another murmured. "Yes," said Maria. Her voice made a sound like a thin stone falling from a height into water. But Maria had said the same thing as the others, only said it shorter. An entire language lay in that monosyllable. Again, it was the point of view of doing, saying one enormous thing, and Maria's point of view was everywhere at once, the center. "Listen," she added the next minute. Perhaps the sunlight quivering on the Perhaps the sunlight quivering on the surface of the stream confused them, or perhaps it was the murmur and movement of the leaves upon the banks that brought the sense of sweet, queer bewilderment upon all five. A new sound there certainly was. Footsteps, as though someone came dancing. Voices, as though someone sang. Figures were seen in the distance, among the waving world of green. They moved behind the cataract of falling willow branches, and the distance was as the distance of a half-remembered dream. "They're coming," gasped Judy below her breath. "They're coming back," Tim whispered, the tone muffled, underground. Ejaculated Stumper. "Coming back?" His voice, too, had distance in it. Whether they saw it in the reflections on the running water, or whether the maze of shadow and sunshine in the wooded banks produced it, no one knew exactly. The figures, at any rate, were plainly visible, moving along with singing and dancing through the summery noontide of the brilliant day. No one spoke while they went by, no one except Maria, who at intervals murmured, "Yes." There was no other audible comment or remark. They afterwards agreed that Whedon was seen clearest, but Thompson and Mrs. Horton were fairly distinct as well, and bringing up the rear was a figure in blue that could only have been the policeman who lived usually upon the high road to London. They carried flowers in their arms, they moved lightly and quickly. It was uncommonly like dancing, and their voices floated through the woodland spaces with a sound that, if it was not singing, was at least an excellent imitation, an attempt to sing. "They're not lost," said Tim as they disappeared from view. "They're just looking for the way." "The way home," said Judy. "They're following someone who knows it." "Yes," added Maria. For another figure, more like a tree moving in the wind than anything else, and certainly looking differently to each of them, another figure was seen in advance of the group, seen in flashes, as it were, and only glimpses of it discernible among the world of moving green. This other figure was singing too. Snatches of wild, sweet music floated through the quiet wood. One said the singing of a bird, another the wind, a third the rippling murmur of the stream, but to one and all it was an enchanting and enticing sound, and to one and all familiar too, with the familiarity of a half-remembered dream. And a flood of memory rose about them as they watched and listened, a tide that carried them away into it, with the heart of something they knew, yet that they had forgotten. In the few moments' interval an eternity might have passed. Their hearts opened curiously. They saw wonder growing like a flower inside, the exquisite wonder of common things. There was something they were looking for, but they had found it. The flow of wonder blossomed there before their very eyes, explaining the world, but not explaining it away, explaining simply that it was wonderful beyond all telling. They all knew suddenly what they didn't know they knew. They understood what nobody understands. None knew why it came at just this particular moment, and none knew where it came from either. It was there, so what else mattered? It broke them out of the heart of the summer's day, out of this very ordinary Sunday morning, out of the brimming life all about them that was passing but could never pass away. And the familiar figures of the gardener, the butler, the policeman, and the cook brought back to them the memory of something they'd forgotten. It brought it back in the form of endless and inexhaustible enticement, rather than of complete recovery. There had been long preparation somewhere, growth, development, but that was past, and they gave no thought to it. Expectancy and wonder rushed them off their feet. The world hid something. Everyone was looking for it, and they must go on looking, looking, looking too. What it was they had forgotten. They entirely forgot. Only the marvelous hint remained, and the certainty that it could be found. For to each of them, it seemed, came from this very reminder, stealing deliciously upon the senses, somewhere, somehow, they had known an experience that had enriched their lives. It had become part of them. It had always been in them, but they had found it now. They felt quite positive about it. They believed. To Tim came messages from the solid earth about him, secrets from creatures that lived in it and knew. Judy catching 1,000 kisses upon the air from her cheeks, divine the mystery of all flying life that brought the stars within her reach. Maria, possessing all within herself, remained steady and calm at the eternal center of the circle, a clearing house for messages from everywhere at once. Asking nothing for herself, she merely wanted to give away, give out. She said yes to all that came her way, and all did come her way. To every one of them, to Stumper and Uncle Felix too, came a great conviction that they had passed nearer, somehow, to an everlasting joy. There was no hurry. Life had just begun. Seemed singing everywhere about them. There was unity. "It's a lovely day," remarked Uncle Felix presently. "I want my luncheon." He picked up Maria and moved on across the bridge. "It's the extra day," Maria whispered in his ear. "It's my adventure, but you all can have it." The others followed with Comeback Stumper, and in the lane they saw the figures of Whedon, Thompson, and Mrs. Horton in front of them, coming home from church. They were walking quietly enough. "We're not late then. There's lots of time," Tim remarked. Crossing the field in the direction of London Road, a policeman was moving steadily. They saw him stoop and pick a yellow flower as he went. He was off to take charge of the world upon his Sunday beat. He disappeared behind a hedge. The butler and the cook vanished through a side door into the old mill house about the same time. In due course they also arrived at the porch, and Uncle Felix set his burden down. As they scraped their muddy boots and rubbed them on the mat, their backs were turned to the outside world, but Maria, whose boots required no scraping, happened to face it still. As usual, she faced in all directions, like a circle. "Look," she said, "there's someone coming." And they saw the figure of a tramp go past the opening of the drive, where the London road was just visible. He paused a moment and looked towards the house. He did not come in. He just looked, and waved his hand at them. The next minute he was gone, but not before Maria had returned his wave. "You're going back?" suggested Stumper as they went inside. "Yes, he's mine, but you can have him too." 10 minutes later, when they all sat down to lunch, the big blue figure of the policeman passed the opening of the drive. Being occupied with hot roast beef, they did not see him. He paused a moment, looked towards the house, and then went slowly out of sight again, along the London road, following the tramp. The end. Oh, that was really quite the story. Really love the evocative, dreamlike language of the extra day in the middle there. Uh, I suppose in the last third there. Um, that was really, really good, everyone. I'm definitely going to be digging further into Algernon Blackwood. Uh, as I've mentioned a few times, this particular writing style, it has a sense of wonderment about the natural world and wonderment about what is occurring in the story in such a way that it reminds me of The Secret Garden, which is a childhood favorite of mine that I really should have finished in March, to be honest, if I had not been tied up in another book. I would have finished the Secret Garden because we got a couple way we got a little ways into the Secret Garden in season one of Paper Cuts, and then we didn't finish it because I was like, oh well, I only want to do it in March. I should have just finished it because it's a really good book. Um, who knows? I might be thinking of another book from season one. Season one's so far ago now. Um, but regardless, like this, I really really enjoyed this book not only for its writing style but also the kind of uh the core thesis there of allowing yourself some time away from time and letting yourself attune to the world, I suppose, is the best way I can put it. Uh, it's just it was very very satisfyingly written to my eye, uh, and I'm definitely gonna keep it in the back of my mind. I enjoyed almost all of this book very very much. Uh, oh, as as pointed out in the middle of the end there. Yeah, those Mondegreens, and the way that like Blackwood attempts to write phonetically words that would be uh, unfamiliar to people closest to the narration here, as in the small children. It's very satisfying for me to read. Um, you know, English spelling is already such nonsense that you can really give it the jiggle jostle to make the phonetics come out differently. Um, on the topic of Mondegreens, if you know the song "Dance Dance," dance dance, oh yeah, dance dance, falling apart at halftime, dance dance. Sorry, as you can tell, it's a little out of my range after 3 hours of talking, but my apologies. But Mondegreen that came out of that, um, before I looked at the liner notes for that song, uh, before I looked at the liner notes for that song, I had heard the lyrics as these are the voice in the dark, which I have no idea phonetically how I did that. Okay, wait a minute. Is Flowers for Algernon by Algernon Blackwood? Okay, no. I thought my brain had fallen out for a second and I was rattling on about how, oh man, I should read Flowers for Algernon. No, it's not. It is something completely different. It is a short story by American author Daniel Keyes, later expanded by him into a novel, and then made into like a bunch of other media. Yeah, as I mentioned, the Codex does a book club. This month is the 28th. I had the 25th in the back of my brain, but I think that was last month's. May 28th. I may rustle up a copy of Flowers for Algernon, even if it's just the short story. Are we doing the short story or the full novel, by the way? I've been misquoting lyrics for decades before I finally read them in karaoke. Yeah, like karaoke and like buying a CD or something and reading the liner notes that way. 100% I was pulling lyrics phonetically out of my butt, and I'm sure there's a thousand misheard lyrics that I don't remember anymore. But yeah, uh, shows how much I pay attention to the book club chat. It's typically the last Saturday of the month. See, that's why the date moves. I'm like, man, you can read any. It would probably be easier for me to find the short story, but if I can find the whole book, uh, I'll probably read that. But yeah, In fact, the differences would be a good conversation point. That's a good point. I will start with a short story and then get as far into the book as I have time for by the end of the month. I should sign up on the form and everything. Anyway, that's behind the scenes Codex stuff. I don't want to dig too far into that. But anyway, Codex does a book club purportedly last Saturday of each month. This month is Flowers for Algernon. By the time the podcast and YouTube viewer are hearing that, we will have moved on several books later. But book club, it exists. It's one of our group projects. I when we can find like movies that are available to be able to be streamed, there's also a movie club. There was a really interesting one relatively recently about like conspiracy theories and UFOs and stuff that if I was not juggling 100 limes at the time it happened, I would have 100% jumped in on. Um, but uh, anyway, my brain is rapidly pouring thoughts onto the floor, so I think I'm gonna call it here tonight, folks. Next week's book depends on whether I can get a hold of some author permissions. If I can't, I do have a backup book that has been becoming rapidly popular recently. Um, a bit out of season for when you would expect it to be popular too. But cross that bridge when we get there. Uh, Monday we will be doing another tabletop RPG, another solo tabletop RPG. Probably another Carta affair. I've been digging through my library for that to try and find more Carta games because initially I glazed over a lot of the Carta games because I didn't have a table cam. Well, now I have a table cam. So I'm trying to pick up a lot of Carta games. I think we were looking forward to Crypt Keeper question mark. But Crypt Keeper tentatively. I might find something that catches my eye a little harder than Crypt Keeper, but Crypt Keeper seems very fun. Um, do I have any more thoughts? Oh, I've been catching up on uh, uploads, so they should be a little closer to in sync with what's happening live. We'll see if that sticks. Anyway, folks, this has been Paper Cuts, and I hope it didn't sting.